Okay, so I'm just gonna wait till it kind of kicks in over here on my YouTube end,
Okay.
but we should be live here.
Yeah, I use StreamYard as well.
Okay.
What's up, Sleuth? Are we live? We with
Yep.
all the peoples? What's happening, brother?
Yep, we are officially live, my friend. Not much. I'm doing well. This is kind of what I have planned for us today, and you let me know if you're going to be all right with this.
Yep.
I won't keep you too long. Maybe an hour and a half. It'll be kind of short and sweet. I kind of want to get your boots on the ground perspective. Kind of ask you a few questions about your observations throughout the process.
Yeah.
You were there pretty much every day, right?
I was there every day.
Yeah, you were there every day, so that's going to be invaluable to us. But first and foremost, I do want to thank you for agreeing to join me today. I appreciate that. And you are from the Defense Diaries, which
Correct.
is a great podcast. I mean, it's one of the fastest growing podcasts right now, right, in the true crime community.
Yeah, and it's so
congratulations on that.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it really started as a kind of a traditional podcast where my dad defended the worst of the worst, Gacy, back in the day. He was one of his trial attorneys. And then, from that, I had these tapes that my dad had given me from his interviews with Gacy for, preparing him for his insanity defense trial, which were just kind of insane to listen to. And I actually never listened to him until I was like, the first time I listened to him all the way through is when I decided to kind of release him to the public. And then I'm like, man, I think I'm going to go and do a podcast, like a traditional one where it's scripted. I wrote it. I interviewed all the old cops who were all amazing guys and just was like, because I wanted to focus. I didn't want to focus on Gacy. Like we had heard enough about Gacy. Like in my pod, I really wanted to focus about who I didn't know anything about, which is unbelievable considering there were 33 victims as the victims. So, and like trying to find information on the victims in that case was so hard to do. I got super lucky because this guy, David Nelson, had spent 10 years researching for a book about all the victims. So I got really excited when I found out that his book was coming, because I was probably about 6 episodes in, and I hit him up and he was like, he had one Twitter follower, like when he posted that he was bringing this book out. So I'm like, and I couldn't DM him. So I finally found him and I'm like, oh man, I would really, really appreciate if I could like talk to you first and foremost, but if I could use some of your content. I said, I'll promote your book because I think it's what we're trying to do over here. So, we really tried to focus on the victims, the investigation, the arrest, and the trial, because that was kind of the stuff you hadn't heard. It's like, if you want to hear about the creep or Gacy, there's plenty of stuff out there talking about him. I wanted to kind of come at it from a different angle. And now we're, I'm working with an old cop. We're trying to find additional victims because we're both convinced that we know where they are. So we've been trying to get that dig done for about 2 years. And it's hard because Chicago doesn't want bodies. They just don't want any more Gacy victims. They want it to be over. And because it'll shine a light on what Chicago police didn't do in the 70s, the whole time that Gacy was active. So that was always my passion play, man. And then I kind of, like probably about 2 years in, we ended up going, like I wanted to start covering like current cases. It was kind of driving me nuts, like doing like the scripted stuff and like old cases. And, I'm like, man, I really want to do, and I wanted to bring my wife in, Allie, who's a criminal defense attorney as well. Because I knew just kind of the true crime community is really, most of our people are, women. Like women love true crime. They're passionate about it. And I know
it's 40 to 60, I think is the ratio.
For you, 40 to 60 women to men?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm way the other way. I'm 70-30 women to men. Like it's like I have a much smaller men base than I do women.
40 to 60 men to women. Sorry.
Oh yeah. Right. So yeah, I'm like more like 70 to 30. So yeah. And then, I started following all kind of like current cases. And then, I obviously live in 2.5 hours out of Delphi. I always, followed the case from afar because I was still practicing law at that time. I didn't really start. I think I was like a year into my podcast when the arrest went down. And so from my perspective, I'm like, oh, well, shit, they got an arrest on it. Let's take a peek. And then we'll get into that as we start going through it, man. And look, I am an open book, dude. Like, there is nothing that is off topic. You can ask me anything you want. If you want to debate it, we'll debate it. But I'm gonna come back at you with a couple questions too, because I want to know what you think my content is. I want to know what you think my actual message was for the last 2 years, because I'll be surprised to hear what your answer is. I think.
You got it.
Yep.
Well, this is what I got planned for you today. You let me know if you want to go this route. So, of course, I want to get your boots on the ground perspective. You were there every day during trial.
For sure.
Then I want to get your professional opinion about what you think is next for Richard Allen from a legal standpoint.
Yeah.
And then I want to finish off by putting you in the hot seat. That's just kind of letting people ask you questions.
Love it. I love it.
I've had people email me some questions they want to ask you. And then that's pretty much, and then we'll let you go.
Awesome.
I do want to say something first and foremost to the mods. One thing Bob's not a pussy. He's okay with the tough questions. But the one thing that we're not going to do is we're not going to be disrespectful to him. So mods, if you see anything disrespectful out there in the chat, I just want you to time them out for the rest of the show. That's it. They're gone. That's it. That's the only rule.
Yeah. And look, man, it's like my rule is over at our channel. I want the debate. Like, I'm a lawyer. I literally for 23 years, man, argued for a living. So it's like, I'm always up for the debate. That's like literally what we do for a living. So, and I've got thick skin, but in terms of like kind of name calling, use your words. You know what I mean? Like, use your words.
No
make your
ad
argument.
hominem stuff.
Right. I mean, it's simple.
No ad hominem attacks, no personal
completely
attacks.
disagree, and then, we'll talk it out. You know what I mean? I mean, you and I are probably not on as different sides as you think we are. That's what I'm saying. When I ask you the question of what you think, what my message has been for the past 2 years, I'll be curious to see what it is, because my content speaks for itself. Like, I don't have to try to go back and create revisionist history. It's like, you could just go check my content out, and it's pretty clear on what I've been saying for 2 years. But people hear what they want to hear. And people also have a tendency to listen to what other people are saying who haven't listened to my content, like the murder sheet. Like, they've never listened to my stuff. I mean, Kevin outright said it. Like, somebody's like 2 weeks ago, Kevin admitted he never listened to my content. And then it turns out they're writing a book. So, I mean, who's got the motivation for, things going the way they did, like in terms of like having a payday at the end of this thing? I guess I'd ask that question about the murder sheet in terms of whether or not they were biased or not. So let's go at it, man. Let's go.
All right. So let me know. Tell me about what was going on in that courtroom, the vibe that you were getting from the jury first off. Like, what were you picking up from all that activity?
I thought that they were a very attentive jury. Like, I thought that they were paying attention. Like, they were everything that you'd want from a jury. I mean, they appeared intelligent from the questions that they were asking. They were like, I never saw anybody nodding, and it's like, I think that's a credit to both sides in terms of like, sometimes when you get an expert up there, like, when we watch trials, you'll see an expert that'll get on the stand for 6-7 hours, and it gets long, right? It's like, you're kind of like, oh man, they lost my interest like a long, long time ago. And, both sides really were very efficient with the experts. They were kind of like, get them on, give an opinion, get them off. You know what I'm saying? And the crosses weren't overly long. The directs weren't overly long. So they were very engaged, man. I mean, I saw a lot of leaning forward, a lot of note taking. They were paying attention. It's like all the things that you'd want from a jury. That was my perception of them. As far as the courtroom itself, it was respectful. It was. It's like, you've got people that are, probably like some of the people in the chat, like the kitty cats of the world that like for whatever reason don't like me because they don't really understand what I'm saying, and then I'm sitting in the defense seats, which, let's just be clear right from the front. Like, Kathy Allen was allotted 10 seats. Kathy Allen appreciated the fact that I wasn't a torch and pitchfork type of person, that I just kept telling people, let's wait till trial. Like, we don't really know what the evidence is. You have to wait till it's vetted at trial. Let's just wait. Like, none of us were there. None of us know what happened. Like, we're all speculating, and I don't really speculate. Like, if you look at my content, I was reading through the documents that were filed. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I think there's value in that. If people don't think there's value in learning about the system that they like to watch so much about, I mean, that's on them. It's like I like to think that I'm giving probably like a 1L legal education. 1L is what they call your first year of law school, to people that like to watch true crime content. We try to explain the law from a completely objective standpoint,
which is a big part.
It's huge. It's huge. It's like,
yeah.
and I enjoy your content, man. I really do. And I know where you're at on
Appreciate
it. And
that.
I've watched
Likewise.
I watch your stuff. And I think that you've got a great radio voice. You do. And it's, and I understand and respect your position, and you're absolutely entitled to your position in terms of how you feel about it. You know what I mean? So like, from my thing is like, I just, like, if people are going to be critical, I just wish that they knew what my content actually was, so that they were criticizing the right thing. You know what I'm saying? But so you had a lot of people. You had like the Greenos out there, where I know they've been like, like coming in hot at me, which I like, whatever, it's like, I can't worry about it. I've got a thick skin, like I said, and but it was super civilized in there. I mean, we're all in there. You've got the victims' families in there. Be respectful of that. You've got Kathy Allen and her family in there, and Jan Allen, who, Rick's mom, who's just like a sweet old Midwestern mom, and it's like, you realize that when you're sitting in the courtroom, the weight of what's really going on, much more than you kind of get that vibe when you're watching it streaming. As much as I wanted this trial to be streamed, and I'm sad that it didn't, that it wasn't, because I think everybody deserved to see it. I think everybody needed to see it. So, it's one of those things that I think it's a shame, and I really can't see a reason why she didn't stream it, because especially in light of the fact that she shut that jury down in terms of access to devices, which I really appreciated. It's like, I don't want jurors coming out hearing my shit, your shit, anybody's shit. I want them going in as kind of like a blank slate, hopefully not really knowing anything. It's huge. It's everything. I mean, you want them to just listen to the evidence and reach their own conclusion. And when the jury comes back, because I've had debates with Michael Osbrook, who's a lawyer that's on my channel occasionally, and who helped with, some of the filings in terms of getting the lawyers back on, like in that phase. And, he's like, oh, I don't have to respect a jury. I'm like, yeah, you do. Like, you do. I mean, you don't necessarily have to agree with it, and that's what the appellate process is about. But they did the work. They in terms of the evidence they were presented, they went back, they thoroughly deliberated, which is all. They went 19 hours, man. I mean, that there was serious deliberation going on. They didn't come back one way or another in 2 hours with guilty or not guilty. You know what I'm saying? It's like, they did the work.
They did the work.
They did. You have to respect what they do. I'm trained to respect it, and as a defense lawyer, man, we're used to losing. You know what I mean? That's just, I mean, most of the time they get it right. Most of the time
you're up against it.
Always. So there's no point. And like, kind of when we get to that verdict, that moment in time, when they're reading the verdict, and it was like, I was trying to explain to my listeners from like how you feel as an attorney. It's strange because you feel as almost as if it's your verdict, meaning that they're about to judge you. You can't help but feel that way. So your stomach's in knots, you're super anxious. You have to remember to breathe, just breathe in through, just to try to calm yourself down. And it's like, you try to put yourself in the perspective of like a defendant sitting there when that jury kind of files in. And it's like, going into it, I'm like, oh man, why? Like, when they read the verdict, I didn't have a visceral reaction. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I was like, that was what I was expecting. Like, I'm trained to expect guilty verdicts in cases from the defense side. I mean, just look at it. I mean, the conviction rates are 95 to 96% in state courts, and 97, 98% in federal courts. I mean, the shocking verdicts are when you get not guilties. I mean, think about any verdicts that you've ever heard, like, that were just stunning, and they're always the ones that are not guilty. Like, think about OJ, think about Casey Anthony, and everybody was like losing their mind with Casey Anthony because we're all like, she's guilty. she's guilty. I can't believe that just happened. You know what I mean? So it's very unusual to get those. So like when I was sitting there in the moment, I was thinking, man, yeah, I would have been like, oh my God, if they had acquitted him, I would have been surprised. Just not because of the facts of the case, but just because that's how my brain works. You know what I mean? So like, and that's
And
like,
the
I
odds.
can't, yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I've been doing this a long time, man. You know, I have no delusions about what's going on in a court of law. It's like, it's my area. It's what I do. So, yeah, I thought that the process in terms of the way that was handled was respectful to everybody in the courtroom. There was decorum the whole time, you know, but for the first day, when it was, so here, throw that question up. So like people keep asking about like this concept of the defense team and Kathy Allen. All right. I want
Which
to
question?
explain.
Which question?
So it was ATODASO Delulu
This one?
Bishes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So the way that it works is the defense has their own seats. Like McClellan got his own seats, like if he had family members that wanted to come and sit in. And then the victim's family have their seats. And then Kathy Allen has her seat. So she was allotted 10 seats. So Kathy Allen was aware of my content for the past 2 years. She was aware of the fact, because she flat out asked me, she's like, I need you to explain to me what's going on. Because neither side in a case like this, whether it's the Patties or Abby's family or Kathy Allen, are kept up to date or apprised of what's going on as the case is being litigated. Like Nick McClellan's not calling Becky Patty and giving her blow by blows like every time he files a motion, and the defense isn't calling Kathy Allen and saying, hey, this is what's going on, this is what we found. You know, they don't get updates like that. And neither of those families have ever been involved in a process like this. So if you've ever been in a court, if you've had the great misfortune to have been arrested for something in your life, and you go into a courtroom, it's a very foreign place. The language seems foreign, you know, the process seems foreign, all of it, like nobody's used to it because it's not a normal thing for us to deal with on a daily basis. And you don't see that as much on TV. Now we've gotten the advantage now to where, you know, we've got court TV, you know, law and crime that stream trials. So it's like you see people becoming more accustomed to what goes on, at least during the trial phase. In the past couple of years, they've then also been showing the you know, the pretrial phase, the motion phase. Yeah, dude, like I talk to the lawyers. So this is again, I can be friends with any lawyers I want. Like, do you guys not understand that? I'm a defense lawyer. Like, so there's a, you know, me talking to lawyers doesn't make me a part of a defense team. I'm not licensed in Indiana. Do y'all understand that? Do you get that concept? Like I can talk to any lawyers I want anywhere in the country. I can have whatever friends I want. No one gets to dictate, especially the murder sheet, who I get to
That
talk
goes
to.
for all of us.
Right. Like, I mean, right, exactly. You guys could, like, you could be friends with whoever you want to be. And then obviously when I'm sitting there arguing for due process and I'm arguing for a fair trial, which was always my issue with this case, which I hope that we can get into.
And that's what I get from your channel. That's what I
Right.
get
Well,
from
that's,
watching
I
your
have
channel.
no idea if Rick Allen committed the crimes. I wasn't there. Like, it's never been me. Rick Allen's innocent. Rick Allen never said those words. Like the
It's more
closest
like
I
prove
ever
it to
got.
me.
Right. Like, we have to see the evidence, and the, like, just based on my experience in terms of probable cause affidavits, that one leaned weak to me and it leaned innocent. So like that, and that was it. But that's just based on reading hundreds of probable cause affidavits. It's like, I did, for example, I went through a probable cause affidavit for this terrible case out down in like the San Antonio area. Another husband who appears to very much to have killed his wife for no reason, 4 kids, you know, and you're reading through the probable cause affidavit, and that's what you want to see. Like, I walk away from that probable cause affidavit still with the presumption of innocence, but like, yeah, they got that guy. Like, that investigation in terms of what they were able to pull, in terms of all of his movements, all the things he did in a 3-day period. And it's circumstantial. No one saw this guy do it, right? But starting from the neighbor that they interviewed across the street, who's talking about, he hears them arguing, and then he like runs into the house because he sees the husband getting physical. He tries to go get his flashlight, and then they disappear, and then he hears who he thinks is the wife screaming in the woods later. From that point forward, the question is, why didn't that dude call law enforcement that night? You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
but in terms of the investigation, now I'm reading through a 14-page probable cause affidavit, and you feel very, very comfortable with the fact that when they bring that thing to trial, that they have more than enough evidence that where I can sit there and say, I trust this verdict completely because I trust the evidence that they got. And there's no excuse for there's no other way that this thing could have gone down. You know what I mean? So, that was just kind of always my opinion on it. And, and I really limited my channel, and I still do, into reading legal documents. That's really what I do. Like, I know you're a digger, man. Like you're trying to crack cases, man. And I love that. I think it's a cool thing to do. And you put a lot of time and effort into it and thought, so I never dismiss anything that anybody does like that. And frankly, you're respectful about it. I mean, you're adamant about your opinions, but at the same time, you're always even keeled. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you're never getting hysterical on your channel. You're just like, look, and you're obviously
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, like, and you'll come up with, things that obviously we can't know. Like, neither of us know Rick Allen from like a rock. Like, neither of us know anything about the guy. So we're looking from afar, and we're obviously speculating. And you always say that. You'll come out and say something, and you'll say, but then of course that's complete speculation.
Yep.
And I respect that. You're not coming in like, oh, like I know shit. You're coming in like, oh, I'm, this is what I think. In my mind, this is kind of the way this worked out. And this is what my opinion is on it. But, so like for my perspective, I never got into that kind of the side of it because I just didn't know what the evidence was. And I think people had like beef because I just refused to completely ignore the fact that Frank's memo existed. Whether or not people thought it was nuts or not, doesn't really matter. I mean, the fact of the matter is it came from the state's discovery. It wasn't stuff that the defense was making up out of whole cloth. It was all contained in the stuff that Nick McClellan gave them. This was nothing that they came up with on their own. It was all stuff from 3 cops who, by all accounts, were very legitimate cops. Now, I know obviously Click has an issue, but I also know Luttrell has an issue. So, I mean, look, we're all human beings. It's like we all have mistakes. But in terms of their investigation, I mean, they were, to this day, they all felt pretty adamant about, the investigation they did into some different folks. And like, I was in no position until it gets vetted at trial, if it does, which it didn't, to discount it. And no one has any right to tell me to discount it. It's like, to me, everything's on the table. It's like, we weren't part of the investigation. And I think that we would all agree with respect to this case that we would have liked to have seen a better investigation done. I don't think that anybody can argue that the investigation had a lot of holes, that things weren't done properly. And I'm not going to sweat Delphi, the Delphi Police Department. And like that kind of shit doesn't happen in Delphi. You know what I mean? It's like you get a double homicide like that. It blows your hair back. You're like, oh my God, like shit just got real, like really fast. And they're going to try to do the best they can, and in terms of why Carter decided in August 21 to get rid of the feds will always be a mystery to me. It's like when you have the ability to have those resources, that manpower and that technology that the feds are going to have, like, why would you ever turn it away unless it's a thing like where you're like, it's an ego thing. Like we want to, like, and law enforcement does it all the time. That's not it's not a mystery. Like law enforcement agencies don't play well together. They're very territorial about their cases, and they don't typically like to share credit if they can solve the crime, but we're in 21, we're 4 years in, like, why are you booting them? And then when you put like Cecil on, would you rather have seen a Fed get up there or Chris Cecil testify about the
phone? That's a good question that we never got an answer of in the trial from Doug Carter, because it kind of shut down right there when they started talking about why you kicked the FBI out. Did you get any vibe on why that happened and why they shut that down and why we don't know?
You did, because it was real short. Because remember, the defense called them And it's hard when you're calling, kind of an unfriendly witness. I wouldn't call him like necessarily adverse, but I mean, he technically is, because you would think he'd be a state's witness, right? So like when the defense calls him, they have to direct examine him, which is different. Like you can't ask leading questions. Like a leading question is like where I were to ask you something, Sleuth, and it was like a question that would require only a yes or no answer, because on cross you're always trying. Yeah, closed-ended, or you're not allowing for like a narrative answer. You're trying to control the examination on a cross. So it's very different, because on direct, you can't ask those kind of questions. You have to ask questions that are kind of like open-ended, where you can allow the witness to kind of give like a bit of a narrative. So that was challenging. And there were only 5 questions they asked, and it's like, I was wondering if they were trying to set Cutter up for something down the road. But it was basically like, when did you uninvite the feds to the party? And then Carter's like,
because their opening statement, that was a big part of it. They said, we're going to hold them to the coals. We're going to talk about this conflict between the FBI and ISP. And then it just gets shut down. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, 100%. Yeah. It was like, it's weird to me. Like the FBI just has like, just the resources that they have compared to, even ISP, and especially like Delphi PD, and anybody else they brought in that was going to be kind of local to the case. And they used a bunch of different agencies for different stuff early on. You had Hammond Police, like working with feds. So they'd have an agent, that was tagged along with by a cop, doing like kind of canvassing of people. And
wasn't that Click?
No, it was that first dude they put on. No, it wasn't any of the 3 dudes. It was they put him on early in the case. This cop
Beasley?
that was.
No, he was FBI actually.
Yeah, no. So you had the poll guy, the Fed poll, POHL, whoever he was doing his canvassing with. He was the guy that talked to Brad Weber, where they couldn't get the Brad Weber report in, where Weber said that he was out fixing his ATMs that day to the Fed. And this other cop, but that other cop was like a Hammond cop. Like a case like that, it's going to be basically all hands on deck. You know what I'm saying? In an investigation like this, where you've got 2 beautiful little girls who have been brutally murdered, and there's no like real motive that's apparent. It's like you immediately start worrying about a serial killer. I mean, you just have to. It's like you're kind of like in this remote area. You're like, what is going on here? And and the crime scene is strange looking, like just is. It's like I'm certainly not going to
something
say
out of a novel.
It's kind of it looks something like out of True
Stephen
Detective
King
season 1. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it had that True Detective season 1. I actually went back. I'm like, was that airing around the time that these homicides happened? Like, what year did that season come out?
I think it was actually.
I think it might have been, man. Like right around then, man. So it was like
2018.
Yeah,
I speculated it had to do with and I'm this is a speculation, but I thought maybe it had something to do with the lost tip. And I know that the FBI kind of fumbled with the marathon CCTV footage. They kind of returned a corrupted hard drive. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I know there was a big argument between the lost tip. You had ISP blaming the FBI for not filing it correctly. And then you had the FBI in return kind of say, hey, we did everything by the book.
So
what do you make of that? First off, I mean, the whole lost tip.
I don't know, because their first witness they call was poor little Kathy Shank. So Kathy Shank was this sweet little like 4'7" woman who was retired, and like as soon as she heard about the homicide, she's like, oh my God, I have to come back and I want to help. Like she was a Delphi gal. So she called up and she said, look, I want to be able to come back and volunteer my time, whatever y'all need. And so they have her come in and they're like, we need you to organize all of this. This is like a nightmare. We're getting so many tips coming in, and like, it's complete chaos. We need you to streamline everything for us. And so they basically put her, they threw her under the bus. I felt, like they kind of made her to be the GOAT. And I'm not talking about capital G-O.
No, you're talking about the scapegoat.
The scapegoat, exactly. So, and I'm like, I felt really bad for her. I saw her in the courthouse for the rest of the trial too. And she always just looked so sad. I just wanted to come up and like give her a hug. I'm like, man. So I don't know, because like I got the impression that that tip wasn't relocated until way later than the feds were uninvited to the party. You know what I'm saying? It's like I got the sense that the tip was like in maybe September, like shortly. It didn't take them long once they relocated the tip.
Yeah, August 2021, I think, was when they booted the FBI.
That's when they booted the feds. So I guess the real question, and I don't know the answer offhand, is when they started to close. Like as soon as when did they refine the tip? Like I know there was articles out there, but I don't know if it was like, and we heard all kinds of stories, right? It was always like the feds, like it was a clerk for the feds that misplaced it, which, you know, because she said that it was in a drawer. Like that when she sat down at this desk, that she opened
it was like
a drawer,
magic.
Right. It was like just kind of a like this like little pile of files that were, you know, kind of sitting there. She's like, oh, like I need to get these guys into the system. And so when she starts doing it, and then, you know, like there was some kind of like, you know, she was like, I wasn't really reading all of the tips that were coming in. That wasn't my job. I was trying to organize them in a way that, you know, they were accessible. If they had been cleared, I was putting
that makes sense to me too. I mean, we're
totally.
talking 72,000 tips here.
It's a shit ton, dude. And like she's just trying to
it
do
wouldn't
like,
get done if she did.
Dude, like, and they're putting it on one sweet little old lady. You know what I'm saying? Who's like literally a retired gal who's doing it for free. Who was like, I was coming up to work, you know, like 3-4 hours a day. You know, it turned into me working from like noon until 6, you know, and they kept expanding her role. You know, she's like, at the end of it, I had 4 or 5, you know, tall filing cabinets that were filled front to back with these tips. And then at some point, they wanted her to start creating a database for them. You know what I'm saying? Which she started doing. And I think it's like when she started the database process, like after she kind of got everything organized, and then she'd say, all right. And I don't like, I can't remember if she said it was chronological, like in terms of like when the tips came in. But, you know, at the point where she's like, okay, I've got everything organized in terms of paper. Cause like everything, nothing was coming in over the phone. Like it was all email tips. Like people weren't like, I know, like I kept hearing that there was a call tip line, but it sounded like what she testified to is it was like emails, or, you know, that there would be in person.
Well,
So,
the tip that I called in with the Julian Powell situation, I don't know if you know anything about that. It was a gentleman that wasn't named, but we ended up finding out he was there during the time of the crimes. And I interviewed him a few times, and he kind of told us everything. And I tried to call in the tip line, and it was impossible. So I sent an email, and I got a call from Tony Leggett like the following morning asking me to send him a copy of the interview.
So was it, so did you get the kind of the sense that it was like they were really trying to get people to do it via email? Cause I mean, in terms of, I get that, you know what I'm saying? Cause otherwise if it's email, it's in writing. It is.
Well, I would have had better luck calling the IRS. Let's put it that way.
Which is no easy task, my friend.
No, that's like a 2-hour project.
Easily. That's being kind.
Yeah, that's putting on a movie and then putting your phone on speaker and forgetting about it.
Napping.
Yeah. And also it said cleared on it too, which I thought was kind of strange.
It did. And it was interesting because when Doolin testified, it was like a really interesting, you know, bit of testimony, because like McClellan got into the whole concept that like after they rediscovered the tip, you know, Doolin's like, oh, all right, you know, I'm gonna take another peek at this thing. He got into his, you know, his resource officer database, pulls up like the fishing license. That's where you get the whole, like he had changed his
changing of the height and weight.
Yeah. And it's like, I kind of like and it's so funny when you're watching a trial with ebbs and flows, right? It's like you hear a little piece like that. Everybody was like, oh shit, he changed his height. That's going to be something that really, and then you never really heard about it again. Like that wasn't something that McClellan decided to hang his, like he didn't even mention it in closing, you know, so kind of stuff like that. Good. So yeah, I mean, it's like he was sticking to, you know, whatever they decided their narrative was. And in terms of the openings, I mean, Baldwin, love him or hate him, nailed it. He's like in the middle of this trial, the state's going to have to switch their theory midstream, and they did. And it was like when they put Brad Weber on, like Brad Weber, when they put him on, took everybody's surprise. Like that was like one of the only times in the courtroom where people who have actively followed this case, you heard of like, like kind of a collective gasp from the gallery, because all of us were terrified of Gull. like there is no, like, Gull ruled that courtroom like with an iron fist. If she
What'd you grade her on her performance there?
Like in terms of courtroom decorum, I give her a 10 out of 10. I mean, she had that courtroom on lock. You know, in terms of some of her decisions, like from the pure trial perspective, in terms of, I probably give her like a 6 or a 7 out of 10, keeping in mind that she is a pro state judge. It's like, and not just in this case, like you can always look at the record of judges and kind of know where they lean. I mean, if you look at judge tracks, like on how most people make it to the bench, most come through the prosecutor track. Like they'll get a job at the prosecutor's office, do that for 10, 15 years, and then ultimately land on the bench. You see far fewer from the defense attorney track making it on the bench. That's not to say that there aren't plenty out there, but I'd say a majority are typically that. But like you can always look, and I don't even know that that's a thing that is intentionally done by judges, where, you know, typically the state is going to win a vast majority of objections, and like it's really hard to win motions. And from the defense side, you know, you've got to really, really prove it, because I mean, judges are of the mindset that I'd rather be overturned by the appellate court than, especially in a high profile case, than take shit for rulings that I made at the lower court level, at the trial court level. You know what I mean? And I got the sense, like, like there were a lot of objections with this kind of the way that Nick was deciding to do it. McClellan is that he would put on his cops piecemeal. Like, so if he was putting Mullins on, he'd say, I'm going to keep him to like limited to one subject area. All right. Like I'm not getting into the entire investigation so that the defense can sit there and cross this guy for 6 hours, pointing out all the flaws. It's like when I'm putting Mullins on, I'm going to talk about him, like literally going over to Harvest Hoosier store or Hoosier Harvest and taking the screen grabs of the video. Right. That's it. And like, I'm not going to talk to him about anything else. When I want to talk to him about something else, I'll bring him on again. I'll recall him, and then I'll ask him about that. So what that does is that doesn't allow the defense to go in there and just firing on all kinds of parts of the investigation, because McClellan says it's beyond the scope. Like they are now talking about issues or evidence that was not brought up during his direct examination. And so she would always sustain it. And, you know, I mean, technically it's right. If it's not brought up during direct, it's not fodder for the defense to be able to get into something else. You have to stay within what the scope of the direct examination was. So, and that was a strategy. And frankly, it was a good strategy by, you know, because we all know what kind of the gaping holes in the investigation are. And that was a good way for McClellan to protect these cops from having to sit up there and just get hammered on all the shit that they didn't do. You know what I mean? It had to come in like piecemeal, which really kind of defrayed it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because if you had a situation where
it could be distracting,
it can, but it can also be more powerful from like, think about most cases where you see it, like where you have a cop witness that's on the stand for 6 hours and they're going through like the entire investigation. And then the defense comes and they get to talk about every aspect of the investigation. And there is no such thing as a perfect investigation. There's just not. Like, we're humans. We're not robots.
Hindsight.
Yeah, there's always going to be mistakes. Always. In every investigation you'll ever see. There's going to be mistakes in every trial you ever see. There's like, that's just, we're human beings, man. We're flawed, you know? So it's like that, like, but like the way that he did it and kinds of like being able to control that and not allow for a long narrative of like 6 hours of like all the stuff that they didn't do or they should have done or that they did wrong coming out in one long thing where the jury's like, wow, man, this thing was a mess. It's easier when he spreads them apart, like in terms of, because like when they finally get the lost interview thing, like was probably the third time they called Mullins, and it was like it was a very limited cross, and that was like way far apart from when they were talking about, like, because it's like, I don't know about you, have you heard? I was watching somebody's content the other night, a little creator that I had seen, and they didn't get, from what I understand, they don't actually have possession of the Hoosier Harvest video. Like for whatever reason, Mullins went in there and took like screen grabs. Have you heard anywhere that they actually have, like somebody said they have 9 seconds of video, which makes no sense.
No,
Because
I mean,
if you're going,
and also they didn't have it during early on in the investigation too, because Nicole Robertson's probable cause affidavit doesn't mention it, and not only that, she gets the time wrong.
right.
She says that Kelsey showed up like around 1:00 when really it was closer to 2.
Yeah.
So
right.
it's apparent that they didn't have that video at that time either.
Yeah. Cause I mean,
why is that?
I don't know. I mean, at that point, I don't know. It's like, it's one of the million questions that you can ask about like things that they didn't do. It's like, I would have loved to have seen somebody, either side, like just get that iPhone. Like there is nothing easier than going to find out whether or not a phone has water damage, especially an iPhone. Like there is a sensor on the side of an iPhone that shows if a phone has water.
That's a little
damage.
sticker.
Yeah, and it takes color. Like anytime I've ever gone in and tried to trade my phone, and like say for instance,
they're like, "Oh, you got water damage, bro."
Yeah, I'm like, "What, bro?" I'm like, "It was like on the counter when I was doing dishes, very little." I'm like, "This bullshit."
It's moisture.
So, right, it's just simple moisture. So like I would have really loved to have seen that. You know what I'm saying? It's like let's just get all the facts out there so I can feel comfortable with the verdict. You know what I'm saying? It's like, because my thing is like, and I know we'll get to that at some point, so I don't want to jump the gun, but
I got some questions for you.
Let's go. Let's keep rolling. So you want?
Well, I want to ask you quick. Well, I want to go ask you a few more questions about if you had any criticism for the defense team.
Oh yeah. I thought it was a critical mistake not to put Kathy Allen on the stand. That was like, I was like, wow, because I was sitting there in the jury and I was closest to the box. All right. So it was the victims' families were on the left side of the courtroom behind the state's table. And then the jury box is closest to the door that you come into the courtroom. So that's closest to defense table. So I was like on that side. So I had a really good view of the jury. And I love to watch a jury because you're always trying to, read through the tea leaves, trying to read body language, all that stuff that you can never do. It's like, I've been trying to read juries for 20 years, man, and you never get it right. I was dead sure on who I picked, who was going to be the 4-person, and I was completely wrong. I was like, the dude that was the 4-person was probably the last person that I would have picked to be the 4-person on that jury. So I'm like, oh man. So yeah, I thought not. So when they so we came back that morning that they rested, and it was Rosie just stands up, the defense rests,
which was shocking.
Shocked me. It shocked me because I thought they were going to do one of two things that day. I thought that they would either recall their forensic data phone expert, and have her just kind of, because like when Cecil went in and like Googled something during the 10-minute break, it's like, yeah, it could be water or dirt. And then, and Ajay, the defense attorney, like gave him the business. He's like, is that how you conduct your police investigations, by Googling shit? And, so like, I thought that they would have her do some research over the evening and, come back and get on to kind of like clarify like that whole situation from like an expert. And then I really thought that they would call Kathy. I thought that.
Did they?
Yeah, no.
Did she agree to go up there?
Oh, of course. Yeah. No, wow. I mean, like that's the kind of stuff I was talking to her about. Like, I'm like, so I asked her, I'm like, if they prepped you, like, are you getting any sense of whether they're going to call you? Because I knew that the defense's case in chief had to be getting short, like short timing, like it was coming close to an end, because in terms of like, we knew at that point, they weren't going to be doing the offers of proof, which was a bunch of the witnesses on the witness list. You know, it was evident at that point that they had just leaned into the reasonable doubt side of it, and that's what they were going to go with, because that would have required
what the Keegan Klein stuff was about.
Yeah, I mean, like, no, I mean,
trying
for
to
an
sneak
offer
in like
proof,
a third party suspect, maybe.
Well, no, offer of proof is done when they excuse the jury. So that means like an offer of proof would have been like that 3-day of hearing, like they did in like the end of July and August, where all the Odinism stuff came up and they put on their witnesses. Now they had filed a motion saying, hey, instead of wasting the jury's time with us putting all that back on, can you just incorporate, you know, the evidence we put on in the trial record for the appellate court? And she and Gull granted to do that, or agreed to do it. She granted that. So like that saved a lot of time with them having to try to get that back in. Like the appellate court will see it in terms of like what her decision on that third party nexus thing is. And, you know, we'll see which way they come down on it. But at the end of the day, you know, the concern, I think she's wrong on the law, but the question is going to be whether or not the weight of the confessions is going to lead the appellate court to decide, yeah, she ruled improperly on that, but with that volume of confessions, it makes that any of her other mistakes harmless error. You know what I'm saying? So that like that has to be the concern for the appellate courts. It's going to always be, does the weight of the confessions outweigh any mistakes that Gull made, turning everything else into what they call harmless error, meaning that they're not going to remand it for a new trial. So like, that's going to be the biggest challenge for any appellate court, you know, cause like Rosie got a ton of stuff on, man. You know, I mean, he really did. He like, I had never seen a trial where they were able to get so much of the conditions of, you know, the pretrial detainment in on any case, were to try to offset these confessions, man. And it's like the one thing that I'm just going to say, and, you know, and it's one of those things where the thing speaks.
Well, hold that thought. Hold that thought, Bob.
Okay.
All right. Hold that thought. I have to reset my system here. I'm getting like some weird static feedback that I get every once in a while. And it's all, I don't know. It's always with you for some reason. I don't know. It's weird. Just give me a second.
Okay. Am I still live? Hey, what's up? I'm going to keep the seat warm for Sleuth. I think I'm still live, right? Am I still live?
You're still live. We're back.
I was trying to keep your seat warm for you, brother.
Okay. Okay. Continue. Now I can hear you clearly. Sorry.
Now I forgot. I'm old. I forget like immediately. What were we talking about? Like, give me a refresher.
So you were talking about, well, I was trying to hear what you were saying is the thing.
Yeah. I was talking about the kind of the weight of the confessions outweighing whatever mistakes
the appeal process. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So, and just so you guys, and I know you guys wanted to talk about this a little bit, and I can just kind of give you like a you know, Cliff Note version of what this process will be. So in Illinois, for instance, we have to file a motion for a new trial. It's like just part of the appellate process. You have to file that.
100% of murder trials, right? That it's just
always
something that happens.
Right. And they always get denied. You know, no trial judge could be like, yeah, I'm going to disregard the jury. And, you know, like you have to, in Indiana, you have to really come up with new evidence in order to file it. So it's not a
proof that she wasn't fair, right?
No, like that's down the road. Like that's down the road. That's more the appellate process. Like this, point being, in Indiana, you don't have to take that step that we have to take in Illinois. Like they call it, I forget what Osbrick told me it's called, but it's not called a motion for a new trial. Error is in there somewhere. I forget, like it's just it's a terminology we don't use in Illinois. So if that doesn't get filed, you have to file your notice of appeal within 30 days of sentencing. All right. Once the notice of appeal is done, then what happens is that they have to put the appellate record together. So that's get all the transcripts prepared, put all the evidence together, and you got to give it in like a big giant package to the appellate court. And you say, this is the whole record. And it's not just the transcripts, it's everything that went into evidence, all the audio, video. The appellate court's got the ability to be able to look at everything.
How you
that's
feeling
the record.
about the odds of it going up for an appeal?
Oh, I mean, they're definitely going to go for an appeal. There's no
I
question.
mean, it
About
getting
that.
approved. Sorry.
Oh, like, well, so what I'm getting from like my friends that are appellate lawyers in Indiana, the direct appeal, there's not a shot. Is the general vibe I'm getting from the, so, but once the direct appeal is denied by the appellate court, then you kick it up for review to the Indiana Supreme Court. Now, how they're going to look at it, because I'm like, the biggest fight in my estimation is going to be, those confessions. And I'm just telling you, Sleuth, like at some point down the road, and I'm not talking about the transport videos where they're camcordering, bringing him around.
Mm-hmm.
The videos of him in his cell for the 7 months out of the 13 are going to be made public. And that's the thing. Like, that's what I'm saying. The thing speaks for itself. No one's going to need to go on there and say, like, there's going to be no prefacing it. Like, you're just going to know that this is how, dude, the dudes, like, we have a presumption of innocence. We don't get to pick and choose who that applies to in this country. We can't get to that point. We can all form an opinion, but we have to understand that somebody is presumed innocent. You can't throw him in prison, dude. And then just and people are like, oh, he had a tablet. He could contact Kathy. No, they had him like just completely cut off from anything that was considered a support system to him. And like, it was interesting to hear his.
Yeah, those are some of the questions that some people have been sending me to ask you. A lot to do with what you're talking about right now.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the psychology, kind of getting into his medical background, and to come to learn that he had major depressive disorder and anxiety since he was a child, like that this was been a thing in his entire life, and that he had this dependency disorder where, he constantly needs to be like held up by people knowing that they love him. And, do you think that he always had a feeling that he was worthless. And like, so this is kind of just like a thing that's been built into him for a long, long time. So in the way that Westcott, the defense's psychologist, who really is the only one who ever did any real testing on him, so she tested the feigning stuff, and like, they have all kinds of ways of, and it's all
her and Walla seem to agree on a lot.
Yeah, like the problem with Walla,
him and Walla,
dude, is it like, if you're being just completely intellectually honest about her, you cannot have anybody treating anybody if they've been digging into the case. She followed you. She followed me. You're the guy.
She didn't like me.
She did not like you. She said that you had a calming,
unnerving.
Voice. It was unnerving. He's like,
which is true.
It is.
It's hard to get me riled, dude. It's
right.
Hard.
It's like, I mean,
I've been in some really fucked up situations,
voice.
And I'm cold as a
cucumber. Yeah, man. So like, you just don't want somebody who's been digging into a case, hard. Because she was like, if you look at the time that she joined groups, like, she joined my group the day of the safekeeping hearing in June, like after she testified. Like, that June 15th is the day that she joined our group. And it's like, the point being, you don't want somebody who's treating somebody psychologically, especially in a criminal case, to have dug into the case to the extent where she's gone out to the bridge. You know what I mean?
Looked up Keegan Kline using her,
right. Yeah, I mean, she's
advantage.
Like, she's digging in. She's trying to solve the damn thing. And then, so, because like the concept being that even if psychologically and subconsciously she's reached some kind of conclusion as to innocence or guilt, like, if she's got to make a decision, because she started saying he was feigning. And that's what I'm saying. When these things make it out to the public, and they will, I hope, no matter whether or not you think Richard Allen is the monster that he's been convicted of being, and you hope that he burns in hell, I hope that everybody agrees that we cannot treat pretrial detainees like this in this country. If we start doing that, it changes the entire system that we're living.
But what's the alternative? I mean, you can't leave him in county when he's threatening to hurt.
No, but you can allow him to actually you don't cut him off from like a support system. It wasn't so much that they were like keeping him in, like they keep, so Nick, it was disingenuous to me that he kept calling it a one-man. No, he kept calling it a one-man cell. like so coming into the trial, they're like, we're not going to call it solitary. We're going to call it a one-man cell, which technically is true. But, like 23 hours a day by yourself, it doesn't matter what's done in that other hour is going to take a toll on you psychologically. It's like, don't believe me on that. Just look up the myriad of research that's been done on people that are left to their own devices with no kind of stimulation at all for that period of time, like for extended periods of time.
It's torture.
It absolutely is torture, and I appreciate it. I heard you talking about it a couple of days ago, and per usual, I was appreciative that you said it because it's true. I mean, like it just is. So and he goes in as a fragile egg, and they cracked him. So so then the question becomes, not is he psychotic or not, because he was like that whole thing, like he was eating his own shit and like doing it, he was faking it to try to explain. I'm like, that's such a circular argument. It doesn't make any sense to me.
But it does happen often.
Well, but
that's the only way you're going to get out of that situation is by
but that's a different
getting
argument
attention and hurting yourself.
Yeah, but that's a different argument. So there's two different things. So there's the act like I'm crazy to hopefully that they get him out and put him in, like move him out of that facility, put him in Pendleton,
even
anything. But like he needed to be moved out of there. And like Pendleton is one of the prisons in Indiana where they have a real big psych ward, right? Or like, for instance, in our case in Garcia, we challenged our guy's competency twice. And really we did it to get him the hell out of Douglas County Jail because they were definitely messing with them. Like it was a constant, like that was another case where an 11-year-old boy had been killed. Like people in prison do not make any kind of distinction. They don't care about a presumption of innocence. If you're in there as a suspected child killer, you are a child killer to the guards, to the inmates, to everybody in there. So it's a situation where you're going to be taking all kinds of like psychological abuse. And that was certainly going on. But like when you have the psychiatrist, the guy who decided ultimately to give him the involuntary Haldol, and like when they flipped him, when Rosie flipped him as he was the last rebuttal witness, it was stunning. Like when they showed the video from the 20th of like Alan just catatonic, because the other argument I was saying, it's not so like your argument at least has some validity that, like he's feigning it or malingering in order to get shipped out, transferred. The other argument that people were trying to make is that he was acting crazy in order to make excuses as to why he was confessing. I'm like, they were happening contemporaneously at the same time. It's a circular argument. It makes no sense. Oh yeah. Wait, I just confessed, but I'm going to act crazy. So it's like that thing doesn't work. That's not a valid argument in my world. It just doesn't have any kind of like validity to me.
And you can also be guilty though, right? You can be guilty and be under psychosis and be
100%.
Being tortured, things like
100%. And that's the thing. So you were asking about the other things I was critical of the defense about. Like that was one of the things I think that Rosie did an amazing job of getting the conditions of his confinement out to the jury, right? So you've got part A, but like when they put on their false confession guy, he was way too brief in terms of explaining like the process. He's like I only remember one thing he said, and he's like, that false beliefs or false memories start from false beliefs, that's where it comes from, and then that becomes a memory. So it was interesting, like when you kind of start like wormholing that thing, and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. But in terms of like giving the jury anything to hang their hat on, and the question in terms of like why would he be making false confessions? And like there's only two ways to do it. If you're the defense, it's one, to put Alan on, right, to say, hey, this is what was going on. It was because to me it was never they're threatening his family and they're going to kill his family. It was always, do you want this shit to end, dude? Do you want to finally see your wife? Because it had been 7 months. And if you look at the timing, after the confession stop in June, that's when Kathy finally comes. So it's like that would have been the approach. Like if you're a guard, you're like, yo, dude, like you can stop this at any point. Just tell us you did it. Not even them saying we want you to make a false confession. We're just saying like, just tell us you did it, bro. Like that's it. And all this shit ends. We'll get you transferred out of this hellhole. And more importantly, your wife's going to be here, And so, but the jury never got that side of it. You know what I mean? They never heard it because it's like, how do you get it in? Like, that's always the challenge for lawyers is how do you get things into evidence? Because it's not just like, oh, you can say anything you want. It's not a free for all, man. There's rules of evidence. It's always the challenge going into a trial to figure out how you're going to get certain things in, whether it's hearsay exceptions, if it's things that that there's going to be objections to in terms of its admissibility. You're always both sides are always trying to figure out how do we get over that hurdle of getting things into evidence, because ultimately that's all that matters at trial, right? Is what gets in. So, like at the end of the day, I thought that as good of a job as Brad did with getting those, those videos in, and I think that it gave context to the jurors. I think it left them hanging with exactly that question you just asked me, or that concept. Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he went psychotic. Why can't he be telling the truth? And it's a totally valid question.
Yeah, because there was a case that I covered where the verdict was that he was insane at the time of the crime, but even though he was insane at the time of the crime, the doctor still said that they knew that he was feigning symptoms throughout the him being in prison. He was feigning symptoms. I think people are just motivated to do certain things, and it's hard to tell whether or not they are faking or not, or why they might be motivated to do that. Because the judge said, I know he was faking, but that has nothing to do with my judgment. My judgment is that he was insane at the time of the crime, regardless of the malingering.
That's such a fascinating, like, an aspect of it, because it's like, so on Gacy, like that was an insanity defense case, because there's like people oftentimes confuse competency and insanity defense. They're two very different things. Competency is typically leading up to trial. If your client is not able to assist in their own defense, if you're not able to communicate with them meaningfully, if it seems like they're not understanding what the hell's going on around them, which obviously dovetails in with mental illness, right?
Mm-hmm. But it could come and go.
It can come and go. And frankly, the kind of the prevailing thought with competency throughout the entire country is that they'll send them to a facility, they'll diagnose him and evaluate him to see if he has competency issues or if he is incompetent. And then they'll keep you there until they fix you, until they make you competent.
What is it, typically like 3 weeks or like 3 months?
No, like with our guy, like the first time, he was significantly better in terms of his just normalcy. Like once he was like 2 months in, but he like was not working with them. He didn't trust the doctors. He's like, you're arms of the state. He's like, everything that you say. And I kept telling him, like, dude, you don't talk about the facts of your case. They're trying to find out if you're well mentally. You just talk about what you're experiencing psychologically.
It's got a point, like when it comes to Walla.
Well, it's for sure, dude. I mean, like, it's true. There's like,
yeah.
And
got a point.
And there was no talking to our client. You know what I mean? So they ended up, and their default's going to be he's competent. And
the judge isn't a doctor, right? The judge, if somebody takes shit and wipes it on their face in the middle of the courtroom, the judge isn't there to say, hey, he's faking. It's like, well, he's incompetent. We'll send him to the doctors. They'll tell us.
Right. Exactly. Somebody who knows 100%, and that's what you want a judge to do. They're like, that's not the judge's call. They're going to say, look, he's acting a fool. Is he full of shit? I don't know. That's what they have doctors for. We're going to send them to where the trained professionals are going to look at them, and then they'll come up with it. But like with the Garcia thing, that case that we handled, he was so adamant about not cooperating with the evaluation that they deemed him competent. They're like, look, I have to think that you're malingering because of the fact that you're capable enough to like have enough of a concept. Right. You're saying, look, you think that we're agents of the state. Well, that tells me you understand the process. You know what I mean? You understand that it's possible that we will tell all the, the secrets to the state. So you clearly know what's going on. You understand that. So, it was one of those things. But in this case, I'm just telling you, man, because these things, they were They were put in evidence. They're going to be made public someday. And I just hope as a country, whether you think he's innocent or guilty, it matters not. We can't allow that to become the norm. Like you just don't put, it can't become the norm.
Especially in the United States of America.
That's what I'm saying, dude. Like it just can't.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's like it cannot become the norm for us. It just can't. And people are going to be shocked, Sleuth. Like this
is. There could be an alternative. We can have an alternative.
We could, like 100%. There's
but
a way.
We need somebody to figure that out, though. You know, nobody's really trying to figure it out. We're just bitching and complaining about it.
Well, I mean, isn't that kind of how this country rolls, man? Isn't what we do?
We need some go-getters, you know, because I'm not a fan of solitary and torture and chopping off hands. You know, I just want to get them out of society. If they're dangerous, if they're killers, just separate them.
Right,
but
and it's tough. It is, but you want to do it in a way that you're not worried about the thing getting remanded back for trial, because the last thing like no one wants the Patties and the Williams family to have to sit through that shit again. You know, like I don't want Kathy Allen and Jan Allen to have to sit through that shit again. And you know, and I'll just tell you flat out, you know, like if people are wondering, Kathy Allen, that's not her say so to take. Like you guys need to understand this. Like I don't know if you guys understand how this works.
So if she gets subpoenaed, she's got to go up there.
If the state wanted to subpoena her, yeah, she'd have to go up. Like it would have been the defense calling her. And, you know, and again, you're having that's a situation where you have that weird thing where the state would have had to direct examine her. They can't ask the leading questions, which are very, very different. You know, the leading questions are where you're kind of like, you're trying to poke holes. Like that's where you're challenging the defendant or the witness. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's a very different thing when you're direct examining. Like when you're looking at McClelland in his case in chief, all of that is direct examination, and that he's allowing the witness to kind of give narrative answers. He'll just ask an open-ended question. So tell me, what did you do when you got over the Hoosier Harvest store? And then he'll leave it at that. And then Mullins will say, well, yeah, I got over there. And then what did you do after that? Well, I drove over to the CVS and I found Alan's car and I took a few pictures of it. And then what did you do with those? You know what I mean? So those are open-ended things. We're on a cross. So, but what my point is that witnesses don't get to decide if they want to testify or not. Like, even if Kathy Allen would have been saying, I want to get on the stand, and she did, she wanted to testify. She was concerned that she might just go off. She's like, the thing she's most upset about is how Rick Allen was treated during that entire period of time. Like in the minds of the Allen family, just because like there's hundreds of hours of him talking about how he's innocent and he didn't do this shit. So it's like we're talking 700 hours. We hear maybe like 15, 20 minutes of like 700 hours of audio of like him confessing. And it's like, and then you've got the white van and the Walla thing. Like, I want to be able to trust Walla's shit. And she made that impossible for me to do. If you all decide you want to trust a Monica Walla, well, then I suggest, like, I'd like to see if you'd like to send your kid to Monica Walla as your therapist, knowing the kind of shit she does.
After what she said about me, I don't know.
Don't make it personal, bro.
Yeah. Hey, she made it personal.
She did. It was, I like to call it it was a backhanded compliment, really.
Yeah, truthfully.
Very calming
but
voice.
I felt like she was calling me a psycho or something, There's something wrong with that motherfucker.
Yeah, that's the backhanded part of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because of time, we do have some questions. Are you okay with sitting in the hot seat?
Yep.
Okay, so this is what I want from the chat. We'll get 10 questions from the chat, and then I have a handful that were a couple were thrown at me in the Discord, and then I received a couple random emails from people that I don't even know.
Okay.
So, and then I have probably maybe 6 of my own, and then we'll close it out with what we'll give you the final say.
Okay.
So.
Pretty awesome graphic.
These are questions. I didn't add the names, but this is from RTD.
Okay.
So we'll start here. And if you guys have a question in the chat, just put in bold letters question for Bob. And we'll get to, I'll say maybe 5 or 10 of those when we're
All
finished.
right. So Lone Pony asks, prison guards have very little, if anything, to do with legal matters. I just wish the narrative would not be pushed further. Guards could care less if he confesses or not. As a general proposition, I agree with that. You know, and kind of the interesting thing with this case, Lone Pony, was that the way that it got set up is that we got to watch both the Mullins and Leggett interview of Allen, like the first one on October 13th, and then watch the whole thing. It was riveting to watch it all. You're like sitting there, like, you know, like you're like, oh my god, is he caving? Is he full of shit? Is he doing, you know, all the things you always watch for when you're watching an interrogation video, right? So, and then they played the Holman one right after that, and then we went right into, started going into the confessions. So you have these two dichotomies of Allen, who withstands the Reed technique without batting an eye, really. Like, I mean, within the first 7 questions, he's like, I'm starting to getting the feeling that you guys are trying to make me the fall guy on this shit. And it rung so true to me, like that would be like, because Allen's not an idiot, you know, and like he knew, he's like, we're 5 years in. I understand that you guys want to close this case. Like everybody in this community knows that. And I'm getting the distinct feeling that you're looking at me for it. And
I
it's
feel
like
he was highly intelligent by the way he was responding in that conversation. It was very telling to me.
But like you're looking at it as an intelligent, like, ooh, he could have gotten away with this shit. And I'm looking at it like if it were you or I that had been brought in after 5 years, and like just presume that we're not the guy, that's how we would have acted. You know what I mean?
My lawyer, I don't even say hi to the police.
Yeah, but that's the thing, Sleuth. So that's like, do you find that telling in any way? He clearly knew he could have lawyered up because he said it to Kathy.
But yeah, it fits the profile of a killer, right? Somebody who thinks that they're going to outsmart the investigators instead of doing what he knows is right.
I don't know, man. I don't, maybe. Like, do you ever see where these guys actually confess? They never strike me as like guys that are outsmarting. Like you're thinking of,
no, it's not about outsmarting. It's about them thinking that they're outsmarting.
Gacy spilled his guts 5 times within like 5 minutes of them charging him with murder. You know, and Gacy was like, thought he was the smartest cat in the fucking world. He was always the smartest guy in the room.
He's pretty smart guy.
I mean, he was smart enough to like, get away with the fact that, like, I mean, if you want to call him smart, just because he figured out, the best way to dispose of the body is just bury him in my house. Because I don't have to be dragging body until he did. Until he ran out of room, and then he had to start throwing them in the river, and then he got really sloppy. It's like he kind of had his MO, but like he didn't really have an MO as well. He had 2. He had the ones where, whatever. I digress. At some point,
killers are crazy, so they always have that kind of against them, right?
That's what I'm saying. Rick Allen's not crazy, dude. I'm just telling you. The best person to ask is the person that I probably had the most access to, which is Kathy. Like I just like they're like anybody who thinks of Kathy Allen. I promise you, Sleuth, that woman has no idea. If her husband is the dude, she was absolutely blind to it. Like there was no. Because I asked her, I said, after the defense rested, and I was talking to her, and I'm like, and I wanted to know. I'm like, what was he doing? Like when you got home from work? She's like, he was asleep on the couch. And I'm like, so I asked all the questions that I wanted to know the answer to. I'm like, who does the laundry? She's like, I always do the laundry. I'm like, how often? She's like, pretty much daily. And I'm like, so does Rick ever do the laundry? She's like, no. I'm like, did you leave the house with anything in the washer or the dryer? Trying to get at, like, did dude come back and like try to wash some shit? I'm like, was there anything in the washer or the dryer? She's like, not that I remember. And I'm asking her to go back 5 years to remember a day that in her mind probably isn't that memorable. You know what I mean? If you're like, you're Kathy Allen, and then and I said, okay, well, I'm like, did he leave at all that night? She's like, he was home all night. Like this is what we watched, which was just generic. Like typically we'd watch a movie on Netflix, and then he got up and went for work the next day. And I'm like, well, did you notice? I'm like, we all know that he was suffering from depression. I mean, was he off in any way? Like, I was trying to figure out if he was giving any sense. And the most profound thing that she said to me, because I asked her like point blank, I said, Kathy, I said, this is a hard question for me to ask you. I said, but is there any part of you deep in your, in the recesses of your mind that you think that Rick could have done this? And this is after the trial, dude. This is after everything's done, right? And she's like without hesitation, she's like, no way. She's like, and the reason is she's like, he's not capable of it. He's like, he's too passive. And the reality would have been is if he had done it, he would have killed himself. Like shortly thereafter, he wouldn't have been able to live with it. And like, I mean, this is just a woman who's been with a dude for 35 years. They've been together since they were like 19.
Yeah, but it's possible you can be with somebody for your entire life and not know anything
Yeah,
about them.
I don't like, is it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, I think that applies to pretty much every serial killer that's ever been willing to talk, who had a family. They didn't know.
Yeah, but not maybe a mom, maybe parents, spouse. I don't know. Like you really think that Huerman's wife didn't know shit? Or not? You think like Carol definitely.
Well, Huerman is I think he's a different animal than if we're talking about, because Richard Allen is a convicted killer at this point.
Right.
I think it would be easy for him to, because from what I've learned from my sources that knew him growing up, that he was the quietest guy that they've ever met. And we're kind of learning about trauma that he might have had as a child, things that led to his mental health issues. I think that he could have been living two separate lives, one in his mind and then one that he expected or thought people would expect from him on the outside.
See, and I mean, and that's a valid assessment, right? So, and like, it was a shame because the defense tried to get the family medical history in. Like they wanted to dig into that with Westcott on. So Westcott was their psychologist who obviously is trying to dig into, but I mean, McClellan had a valid objection. He's like, well, did she dig into the actual records, the medical records of the family members, or is just self-reporting by Rick, which would be hearsay, right? So that would be like if I were trying to get into like your family medical history sleuth, and I was going from your records and it's just based on what you were saying happened, as opposed to actually getting your folks' medical records. You know what I'm saying? So like, I got why she sustained the objection, but it would have been interesting to hear it, if there was any kind of trauma. I think that probably the biggest trauma was that, Ken, his stepfather, who stepped in right away, but that Rick's dad fucked off like early, like really early, like he just disappeared. So, I mean, like in terms of like, I don't know how that affects a kid in terms of, like my parents divorced when I was young. I was like 5, but like I was thrilled. Like the only thing I remember about my parents being together was them screaming at each other and me hiding under a bed. You know what I mean? Like, and I remember not being real upset that they were no longer in the same house at that age. And that was about it. But I also don't have many like happy childhood memories before like the age of 10. Like I don't remember anything like.
And there's things that you've probably pushed down in your subconscious 100%. From that you have no clue that are even
100%, dude. Yeah. Like I've got all kinds of shit that I need to work out.
So let's add some mental health issues to you, a series of stressors,
totally,
and then knock you off the wagon, and that gives you a recipe for murder.
I mean, maybe. Like I can't say it doesn't. I mean, like you said, right now he's a convicted murderer.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, like at this point, you've got to. It did.
As of right now, it did.
As of right now, it did. Like that's where we stand. And there's like 12 people, like I said, and I gave you my evaluation of the jury. They were like, I didn't think this was a jury of morons. You know what I mean? Like with what they were presented at that trial, they came back with their verdict and they deliberated 19 hours. So I hope that kind of answered the question. And I know I always tangent, but
Stone. No, thank you. So we'll do 5 more from, the
Yeah,
chat,
I'll
and then
try
I
to make
gotta
the answer shorter. I know I'm
no, if you
long-winded.
got the time, we got the time, so
All right, cool. So, Howard Music, question for Bob. What did you think of the clarity of the original video in regard to what you could see and hear of Bridge Guy and the original girls? Dude, I sitting here today, I still have no idea how they stabilized that video and did what they did with the last one. So the way it went down was, and it drove me nuts, and that was a great music or a great question music because like the first we only got to see it like twice the entire trial. So the first time they show it, I'm like, holy shit, we get to see the entire 43 seconds, man. So like everybody's like, you're trying not to blink so you don't miss anything because it's so quick and you're trying to see everything and you're trying to take all of it in. And it's like I'm watching it and Bridge Guy looks like way, way far back. Like I honestly didn't see him like the first time I watched it, but I probably was looking at different shit. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, because at some point, as Abby gets closer, Libby puts the camera down, the camera face gets pointed down to the ground. So you see the gravel, and then she kind of,
where does it go? Where does it lead them? Where do you see them
then,
going?
so like you see it, it starts with Abby walking towards her, like for probably like the first 10 seconds. And
Okay.
then Libby starts talking.
Does
She's like,
Abby
oh,
look like she's, like, having a hard time on the bridge? Like, kinda like she's taking her time, like, it's kinda scary?
I don't know. Like because by the time she pulls the camera back up for like an instant or maybe a second and a half, you don't see the full shot of Abby, but you see Abby's legs and Abby's like jogging a little bit. All right. So that would tend to lend to the concept, right? That like,
Mhm.
it's either it's a scary thing and like you're just trying to finish it off real quick, which is a thing. Like anytime that I'm getting like the end of
It's a
something that,
lot safer on the at that end of the bridge, like,
well,
there's no
yeah,
real
because you're
spaces
not
in
over the right, you're not
yeah,
over the water anymore. Like once
and
you're
there's
not
no
over
wear
the
and
water,
tear either on that end of the bridge, like, it's
right, it's
everything
way
is
cleaner.
intact. Yeah.
Exactly. The ties aren't nearly as shitty as
Yep.
they are up towards the front end. So,
Exactly.
and like when I got there, they had done the work. So it was like half the bridges or half the trestle's already gone. They built the concrete path that leads about halfway through, so it's obviously completely different from what it originally was. But you're right. Everything beyond that, the ties are pretty pristine. I
Yeah.
mean, you would feel like I'm not going to lie. I really wanted to crawl over that banister and walk and get to the end, because I
Mhm.
really wanted to because I had a guy who like had a drone and he's like, we'll just drone it all, man. And I'm like, all right. I'm like, that's not quite the same thing. I mean, it's close, but I wanted to be able to walk it. I'm like, I'm not trying to get like arrested for trespassing or like have Weber shoot me if I'm down because that dude would
Yeah, he
definitely put a
might.
hole in anybody that's on his head. Are you men from the bank? my daddy said to shoot anybody from the bank. It's like you get that vibe from the Webbers. So I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, dude. It was like so you see this flash up. She pulls the camera back up for like an instant, and you see kind of Abby hustling past her. But like prior to that, it was strange because you hear Libby like kind of like in a real soft voice, like kind of like a so here you see there's some gravel here. And then she turns towards the side off the tracks. She says, oh, and there's here's the a gravel path. And then you hear, guys down the hill. And then that's it. And it's at the very end of it. It's like at the very end. So I'm like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, God, was that 43 seconds? I'm like asking, I'm like, that seemed like it was like not 43 seconds. And like the woman from the comment, she's like, oh yeah, that was 43 seconds. I'm like, were you timing it? I'm like, because it didn't feel like 43 seconds, but you're losing. You can't gauge time in a moment like that. It's like the video
Yeah.
that we've all wanted to see forever, and you're finally seeing it and you're like, you want to watch it 1,000 times, And so right after that, they then show because they had the cop up who did basically enhanced it. And they show this first version of an enhanced video. And so that point, you clearly see the bridge guy, like you see him, and he looks like I was guessing maybe 10 yards behind Abby, right? Okay, and then Abby's coming through. You can hear Libby's voice much more clearly. and you can hear guys down the hill. Now, I never hear anything racking like that. Like, I don't hear a gun rack because they're both stepping on those big gravel, like kind of quartz rocks. So that's just like
leaves and things too.
Yeah, but not even the leaves because they're still on the tracks. You know what I'm talking about? Those like those quartz rocks that you see on the railroad tracks. Those crunch and they just make a lot of noise when you're walking.
Bounce around.
Yeah, just even like if you're walking, like just go walk near tracks. They always have those same rocks typically on the sides of tracks. It's like they're noisy rocks when you walk on them. So I don't hear anything, but I don't have noise canceling headphones on either. Because Leggett got on the stand and he's like, look, I listened to this thing 100 times, and that's where he throws in, that he hears Abby saying a couple of things. Like, is he still behind me? And
the
like
gun and all that.
Yeah, you can't hear any of that like with your naked ear. Like, you just couldn't. Like, I asked everybody. Didn't matter. Like, I was like, did you hear that? I'm like, because I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear every bit of it. I wanted to watch both of them. So then,
could you see a gun, like a clear gun? Did they do
No.
any editing out of like a gun or anything?
No, you couldn't see a gun at all because you never really see the bridge guy again. Like, you don't see him in frame. Like, even with so the next day after we saw the first enhanced video, the next day they put Tony Liggett on, right? And Liggett's up there and he's like, all right. And then and that's when they play like the super stabilized enhanced thing that you see shit that you did not see. I'm like, what in the hell? Like, Allie, my wife, she's like, I wonder if they were somehow able to access the back camera, which is a really interesting concept. You know what I mean? It's like, theoretically, because when we can switch from front to back camera, like if we're taking selfie mode and then you're switching it to see the world, I'm like, it's technically still probably getting those images, right? I mean, I would assume so, because it's like you just see, you just see more, man. I'm like, how did they do this? I'm like, what are we seeing, man? So it was like, and then you never see him again until closings. Then we get the opportunity to see it again. So it's like, it's crazy, man. It's crazy. It's like, I can't wait till that shit makes it out to the public. We're all going to be like losing our minds going over these things a million times.
Well, can you figure out any reason why they didn't release it to the public?
No, I can't. Like, I honestly don't know why they wouldn't have released all of the 43 seconds to the public. Like, even if it was incrementally, like, all right, here's another 10 seconds. Like you'll see it when you see it. And eventually someday you're going to see it. Yeah. And you'll just it's kind of like the PCA. I'm like, why did they have this sealed for 3 months? Like this should have just come out. Like, there's nothing in it that, like, if you're going to redact witness names, fine.
Well, Holman told Hannah Shakespeare, like, if it was your family, you wouldn't want it to be public.
Well, but the PCA didn't really contain anything like super.
No, I'm talking about the video. I'm talking about the video.
Oh, no, I like, dude, I don't like, I guess from the perspective that you're seeing Abby for the last time alive is devastating, and then you're hearing Libby, you know what I mean? From that perspective, it's obviously heart wrenching hearing these two little girls in their last moments,
Yeah.
But in terms of kind of like anything where you get any kind of sense of like violence happening right there's nothing like that in there, I mean, but it's like, it's haunting. It's certainly haunting to hear it, like just kind of knowing what the end game was there after that video takes place. So from that perspective, and who am I to say? I mean, if those were any of my 4 kids, I probably wouldn't want to hear that either. You know what I mean? Or maybe I would, I don't know. Like, thank God I'm not in that position. It's like my kids are all,
thank God,
safe and sound. So it's like, but like, I can't pretend to know the answer to that for the Patties or the Williams family. It's like, I don't know, man. I just know that that's like crushing, and I take huge umbrage with anybody who's casting shade on either of those families. Like, I don't put up with that shit. Like, not on my channel. Like, that's not something, because like the murder sheet went through my, because it's like I had made a comment about just the investigation in general, and all of us know, I mean, you always start with the family when you're clearing people. You always start with the people closest to the victims. Always. That's like any investigation that you'll ever look at, the family's always on the table initially until they're cleared, because it's typically somebody that you know, that like, I mean, most murders are typically somebody that you know. So,
Yeah,
you
true.
know, but in terms of anybody, like
And
there's
that's what
no,
a lot of people use as excuses to attack the family.
which
They
is
use that as an excuse.
which is ridiculous. It's one thing to say, hey, you know, maybe they should have looked at the family initially,
Which they did, especially
right,
Kelsey, right?
exactly. So, you know, anybody saying anything is like just gross speculation. And when you've got family that suffered that kind of loss,
I appreciate you
I ain't
saying that.
hearing it. Yeah, I ain't hearing it, dude. Okay, Todd. Sorry, I'm so long on these answers, y'all.
No,
Bob,
take your time.
if true, the supposed duress caused by prison leads to false confessions, then it's also true that getting caught after 5+ years for homicide when you gave yourself away can also cause duress. I mean, certainly. I mean, you can't, like, I mean, if you feel like you got away with it and then the jig is up, that would certainly cause duress. Like that's the part of it that I'm kind of talking about. I wish it was anybody, like, in a perfect world, Rick Allen would have been kept in Cass County, that they would have allowed him to see Kathy, that it would have been like a normal circumstance. Yeah, they're keeping him away from everybody else, but Kathy gets to visit, you know, once a week. There's some form of him having a support system. And then if he's making the confessions, dude, I'm trusting those way more, way more, because then what is the excuse? Like, okay, yeah, he lost his shit, but you know, and I've made this comment a million times on my lives. I'm like, because he's psychotic, that doesn't mean that he's telling lies. He could just be telling the truth. And that's an absolute, like, for anybody who's not saying that is full of shit. It could be either way, you know? And like I said, like my thing with him in terms of if they're, and I do disagree with Stone Pony, because like I had gotten into that. I was talking about how we watched it with the first 2 interviews. And the one thing is that Holman went at him really hard with the read technique, you know, like all that thing, which would really be an interesting conversation in terms of law enforcement. Like that, and I did hear your live about it, and we're on that same page. I think it's bullshit that they can come in and lie to you and say that they have shit that they don't have. You know, I see the utility of it in terms of it does get people to crack on shit. But it's disingenuous. You know what I mean? It's like you're like allowing law enforcement. That's why I'm always saying, I'm like, cops are trained to lie. Like
Yeah,
they just are. Like they are the best liars on the planet. They're trained to do it. I mean, they're trained to do it in order to elicit confessions. They go through courses on how to lie about things and to be very, you know, very,
techniques.
it's so, you know, after you see him survive the read technique with Holman, where they end it with Kathy sending Kathy in, who they've already told outside of the room that we got your husband dead to rights. We've
And that
matched.
kind of goes to Cindy's question here. You're kind of
Oh,
segueing into her
okay.
question.
So Cindy, Bob, what do you think of the fact that Richard didn't tell her he was on the bridge? I don't know if he did or he didn't.
Because didn't she come into that interview with Holman and say, well, you never told me that you were on the bridge?
She did, or she questioned whether or not he told her. But like, and here's my response to it. So, and it's legitimate in terms of 5 years passage. Like, so say for instance, let's pretend in a world that Rick isn't the guy. And he's like out there and he's like, yeah, I was out there that day. And, you know, she's like, whatever. He says, you know, and she doesn't ask him like specifically, well, were you out on the bridge? Which seems like, you know, that's kind of part of the thing where I've heard you talk about it in the past. Like, is it realistic to think like, as you know, this thing, you're living in the town where it happened. It's omnipotent. It's everywhere. You know, you can't escape the fact that these 2 homicides took place. Is Kathy ever like quizzing him? You know, is she ever at that point where she's like, well, you know, like, Ricky, were you ever out there that day? You know, like on the bridge? Like, did those conversations ever take place? You know, and it's like, so when she gets in there, she goes in having been told, all right, after 5 years that they got her husband dead to rights. So that's what I'm saying. You have to try to put yourself in Kathy Allen's mindset right there. Like, her whole world has just been exploded in a matter of 5 minutes. So something that she didn't even think was possible, that wasn't even a thing. They had gone 5 years living their life, and all of a sudden they've got a cop sitting next to her saying, "We got him." Like, I don't know how to tell you this, but your husband did this, and this is how we know he did it. So she goes into the room with her mind blown. You know what I mean? You have to
Asking
try
about the
to,
bullet, right? Didn't she
right.
ask,
She
like, "How did your
immediately
bullet
asks
end
about
up
the
there?"
bullet, but she's immediately like, dude, like
What
I
the
was
fuck?
trying to write a really like overly long like answer to a question. It was basically that same question on Twitter, and I'm ultimately I'm like, forget it. It's like I went past like the check mark amount of shit that you could write. So having to do like a spool, I'm like, I'm not doing a spool. But I'm like, if you put yourself in that perspective and you're like, okay, like say your spouse, the person that you probably know best, and I think that we all agree, you can't really ever know somebody completely, right? We all have those demons that we hide, even from the people that we're
Especially
closest with.
men, I think. We don't wanna bother our wives and
Right, and
family with
depending on how
stressors
dark
and
your
things like
shit
that.
is, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're certainly not, if you got some really twisted shit going on up there, you're not gonna be sitting down talking to your wife over dinner about it,
Well,
you know?
thankfully, my wife is just as twisted as I am.
Yeah, I got lucky. I married my person too, man, so it's
Yeah.
good. It's like we're
Mhm.
lucky like that.
Yeah.
But, as far as Kathy goes, um, yeah, I just like she went in there with her mind blown and her mind spinning and like, oh my God. Like just imagine that, like this person you've been with for 35 years and they're telling you that he's committed this crime and they have the proof to prove it. Like you're like, where's your head going to be in that moment in time? Like you're going to be trying to be thinking of everything. You're going to be trying to go back over the last 5 years and thinking like, oh my God, did I miss shit? Like you're going to be thinking of everything. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're just
Mhm.
like all in that moment of time. So it's like, but I think that might have been one of the things the defense was worried about, by putting her on the stand. Like, how
I
was she
agree.
that question?
Yeah,
Because
you
she,
don't want her to tell the jury a story of, the origin story of the bridge guy, right? You know?
right. I mean, if she even knows it, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, it's like one of those two things, So it's like, and you also have the issue, which was another criticism of the defense that I had was like, you never know where was Rick Allen the whole day. Because
That's my biggest question.
when you don't put Kathy on the stand, you don't even hear the end of the day portion of it. Like to me, it's helpful to know that dude's on the couch asleep if you're of the mindset like, it's like probably you commit a double homicide, you're probably going to be pretty like juiced up. If like that's where you're like, I don't know but I guess the counter argument could be like you're mentally exhausted and you pass out. Like who knows? But like to
Or
have
you're
that.
hungover.
Right, yeah, 6 beers, if he really drank 6
Well,
beers, it's
yeah,
like
we know that it's half truths if he's 100% a guilty man. He's not telling the full truth.
right,
And
and you're like,
also, maybe her, her story of what he was doing that day, maybe it matches with one of his confessions.
I mean, it's probably like I think the defense would have known that, and, like, Kathy would have told me. You know what I mean? Like, Kathy was like, I spent a lot of time,
Like,
I'm
was
not
he in Peru that day? That's what he said in his
yeah,
confession.
well, he went to his mom's house for certain. Yeah, he
So
was
that
there
that
that
was
day.
part of his confession. So
Yeah.
I think I don't think they wanted the jury to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there were absolutely true things in there, but it's also he had said that I think he had said that I think I'm trying to remember if he said that exact statement in one of the audio recorded ones too. I'd have to look at my notes. I
Because
can't
that sounds
remember.
like the movements of a killer. Somebody, blows off their family. That's what the FBI was looking for, somebody who suddenly changed their plans, right? That's what he,
In a given day.
yeah. And then he
Yeah,
fell off the wagon apparently too, right? During
I
his
don't know.
confession.
I don't know if he was on the wagon. He might have been because I think after the suicide attempt, which was that domestic thing that people were
Mhm.
talking about,
Was that
like
2015?
I think so. It was like it was a couple of years.
2015, 2016,
Yeah.
one of those.
So it was like it was like and somebody had come up with like an interesting concept which I thought like was kind of something that was thought provoking to me. And they were like, if that bullet was indeed in that hope chest or the hope box or memory box, I'm like, would it be possible that that would be the round that was in the gun that he had in his mouth? And that was like, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of an interesting concept.
Like a reminder, or when he's
Yeah.
ready, maybe.
Or that this was going to be the end of my life if I had gone through it, type thing. You know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can construe it, but it was kind of like I hadn't thought of that, which is why I like to listen. I like to hear other people's shit. You know what I mean? It's like, to me, it's interesting. It's just like I'm very open-minded about things, and I love this conversation. I think it's great, man. And it's like, I think your viewers are awesome, frankly, even if they hate me.
Not all of them. Not all of them.
Good.
So there's some that aren't fans, but
yeah, I mean, look, dude,
we don't promote hate over here.
No, and either do we over at our spot. And you know what? I mean, the reality is, you're doing something wrong if everybody loves you.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean?
You're not ruffling somebody's feathers.
Right. You're like, you're going to take the most flack when you're closest to the target.
You don't want to be placating or kowtowing to anybody.
I mean, we're both rap fans. I know that. Like, we're both,
for sure.
We're both Beastie Boy guys, like, at our heart. So, all right, Patty, educate question. I came to this case with an open mind and found him 100% guilty based on all the evidence. What's the main thing? See, I don't know. Like that's what people just don't get about me. Like, I don't know if
he's not about innocent. You got to prove that he's guilty.
Right. Like my whole thing, like, I have no idea. Like, I live in that world where, could he be the guy? Yes. Could he not be the guy? Yes. Like, I live in that horrible, horrible world of the fence. And so, like, the way that I just look at things, and I can't help it because my brain's trained a certain way. It's like, you can't do anything for 20 plus years, like, that requires you to use your mind, and you're trained to kind of think a certain way, and you don't turn it off, So it's like, I'll always look at things, and I tell people, like, there's no question when you come over to my channel. I mean, the show's called Defense Diaries, for fuck's sake. Like, there's like people
it's like, do I have to explain to you I'm biased? Like, I'm open about it.
Right. I'm trying to give you a perspective from a defense attorney. So I'm always going to lean to the defense side.
Yeah.
Because that's how my brain works. I can't help it but I try to be objective about things, and if, like, I'm criticisms of everybody involved, and I've been like that the whole way. Cause, like, every lawyer's different. Like, we all think differently about shit. There's shit that I would have done differently all day, and, like, in terms of, like, it's fascinating to me to sit there and be like, oh, this is what I would have done differently, X, Y, and Z, if I were trying the case. You know what I mean? It's like, but it's easy to sit there an armchair quarterback, because you're never going to get everything in at a trial. And if you ask McClelland, who would be less inclined to be like, yeah, I wish I would have done this because he got his verdict, but if you're going to ask the defense, they're going to say, yeah, man, it's like, yeah, I wish we would have done this, or this. You know what I mean? So it's like, but it's like, to me, the process of it is always interesting, in terms of, like, Allison and I have very interesting conversations off air about, like, what we think were mistakes and what we would have done. And, and it's like, but in terms of trying that case, I thought both sides did, they put on a good trial. I really do. It's like, people were like, oh, those guys are clowns. I'm like, no, they're not. Those guys are both 20, 25 plus year trial attorneys. They know what they're doing. And they put on both sides put on a good case. It was a well-run trial. They were both ready for trial. They both, put on the evidence that they were allowed to put on, and they let the chips fall where they may, I mean, and that's, in any kind of trial, that's what you want to see. You want to see both sides coming in competent, because you don't want it to get overturned because one of the sides was a piece of shit. You know what I'm saying? It's like, for the families, you want this thing to be done properly, which was always my concern going in. I'm like, just some of these things that Gull was ruling on, in terms of just her approach on a lot of things from the law side of it, having nothing to do with the facts and the evidence, but just how she was conducting it in a pretrial fashion, and just not giving rulings with law and, like, a rationale of why she made the rulings is very unusual, because the appellate court relies on that stuff. That's all they have in terms of an appellate record. So, that's why I was highly critical of her, because I just never seen it like that. And especially in a case where she has to know the eyes of the world are going to be on this thing. You know what I mean? It was strange. Question for Bob: do you see Abby or Libby's face in the video?
Last one from the chat.
You do see Abby's face from afar. So like the first shot you see of Abby is probably she's about 10 feet from Libby. It looks to be maybe a little, it's kind of hard to judge distance, but you see full Abby. And then the camera points down. Like, so you probably see Abby for a couple of seconds and then camera points down. And then when the camera kind of points back up for a second, you're just kind of seeing, like, I want to say mid thigh and like Abby's feet running past. And then that was it.
All right, let's go here to some of these questions that were emailed over to me.
Okay.
From an ethics standpoint, and this is from RTD. From an ethics standpoint, if you know your client is guilty of a crime, how do you represent him? I think you've been asked this before.
Yeah.
By Peru.
Yeah.
Do you attack the timeline of events and not provide an alibi, but only try to create reasonable doubt, or some other tactic?
Well, so I mean, most of the time, and there's it's a great question. It's probably the number one question that defense attorneys get. So most of the time, the reality is that, and just so you guys have an understanding how it really works, because I know that we tend to think that everything goes to trial. The reality is very little goes to trial. I'd say like less than 3% of cases go to trial. Most things are pled out. So really the primary role of a defense attorney is not to get innocent or guilty people off. Because if they have the evidence, you're typically going to your client who they never come in if they've committed a crime, admitting it to you. That's TV shit. That's not real life. Like, they'll always have a story, or they're always denying it. And then I get the discovery, and then I'll sit there and I'll go through the discovery, and I'll call my client and I'll say, hey,
and advise them.
Yeah, you want to come in, man? Like, this is what we got going on, bro. So I'm like, look, this is the evidence they have. I'm like, we got a real problem here. Like, at this point, do you want me to go and try to talk about a plea agreement? And then at that point, because like everything's not murder. Like, I mean, a vast majority of cases are theft,
manslaughter,
like not even where somebody's dying. Like, you just have assaults. Like, the vast majority of the crimes are drugs, assault, like DUIs. You have a million different crimes that are going on. So, and if I've got a young client, like an 18, 19-year-old kid who just did some stupid shit, nobody really got hurt. Say they bought like a corner bag of blow because they're going out on a Friday night and they get caught with it. Yeah, college kid. And then, I'm trying to convince a prosecutor. I'm like, hey, I get it. I'm not asking for a pass here, but let's look for an alternative to hanging a felony on this kid. Because if you hang the felony on him, you've ruined his life. And like once you do that, you're creating a person who it's going to be damn near impossible for them to be a productive member of society. And on top of that, he's a kid who made a mistake, so it's like a lot of that is the reality of it.
Do the prosecutors want that too, just as much as the defense?
No, man, it's like it is such an uphill battle. It is such an uphill battle. And it's
they're not looking for the plea in most cases.
No, I mean, they are, but they're not given any wiggle room. I mean, you got to, it's like, because you get
20 years, you're like, well, no, that's not much of a plea.
Like, this is like a first offense type shit. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like, whoa, man. I'm like, this is like a victimless crime here, man. I'm like, what? So it's like that part of it is really like a bulk of our job. But like, in terms of like defendants in general, what we do is that we make them understand their rights. Okay. We make sure that if they are going to go to trial, that they get a fair trial. Our primary role, in my estimation, or one of our primary roles, is to make sure that the cops are not violating that person's rights. Because if they're violating that person's rights, like say they're doing bad searches, say they just kicked the door into somebody's house, went in, and they're trying to say it was exigent circumstances, and then you go and you look at the body worn cam and it wasn't exigent circumstances.
What is that? Does that mean like they can hear screaming, or they see
blood, or like right, or like somebody, like a criminal goes running through, they know that they've committed some kind of assault, and they see the person running through into somebody's house that's not their own. The cops can chase them in through there. Obviously, like, you've got car searches, which are always up for grabs, and they've made it really easy for them. If they smell, like, the number one probable cause way to be able to search inside your vehicle that they're using now is the smell of burnt marijuana. So with
There's
all
been
these,
some really good laws, though, have been passed in some states that prevent that now, which I'm happy
yeah,
about.
and they should be, because it's like, so the whole point
Or
being
they'll
when
do the
you're
fake hit with the dog, like, "Oh, we got a hit."
right, exactly. So you get that, and then they've passed some pretty good laws with that too. It's like there's a time limit. They can't leave you sitting there for hours and hours while they're trying to get canine over there. But, like, kind of at the end of the day, with respect to making sure that the cops are doing their job honestly and not violating constitutional, the constitutional rights of the defendant, that matters to all of us. It really does. It's like, people forget the defense attorneys are really the only people out there that are defending our rights under the Constitution, because the cops and the prosecutors are the government. And if you think about what the Constitution really is, it was a document that we wrote all those hundreds of years ago after we liberated ourselves from England, saying, hey, this is all the shit that the government can't do to us, the citizens. You can't make laws that abridge our free speech. You can't make laws that say that we have to follow some certain religion. You can't make law. You know what I'm saying? So, like, we wrote this kind of like this worksheet for the government to say, hey, this is the shit you can't do to us, the citizens. And there's nobody else that protects those other than defense attorneys. And that's gospel. There is nobody else. So, like, any time that, like, you see, say for instance, it's a drug case and I filed a motion to suppress saying it was a shit search, that they violated this guy's Fourth Amendment rights, and the judge agrees. The judge looks at all the evidence. You have the hearing. Judge says, like, hey, man, sorry about that, cop. You screwed up here, dude. Like, this is a bad search. I'm tossing that evidence as fruit of the poisonous tree. That guy walks. Like, don't blame the defense attorney because he did his job protecting our rights as citizens. You blame the cop who did the dude dirty. Because if we don't file that, like, just think of it this way. If we're not calling cops on bad behavior in terms of violating people's rights,
Who else
what do
will?
you think cops are going to do? If they get away with it over on repeat, we're then living in a very different country than we live in right now. And, like, I hope that resonates with some people because it's the truth. So, but in a case where I've got a guy who's, like, guilty, I go into that trial with doing my job, make sure that they got a fair trial, because I know if they have the evidence, they're going to get the conviction. So if I've got a defendant who's adamant, and that's one of the things that lawyers don't choose. Like, as citizens, we have the right to choose whether or not we want to plead guilty or not guilty, whether or not we want a bench trial or a jury trial, and then whether or not you want to testify on your own behalf or you don't. Lawyers have no say-so over those. Those are left in the hands of the citizens. So if I've got a guy who's pleading not guilty, and then I say, all right, and say it's that instance where I get discovery and I'm like, they got you dead to rights, homie. I don't know what to tell you. Like, this isn't some silver tongue shit. This isn't magic, bro. We're going to go in there and they're going to hammer you. And they're like, fuck it. I don't care. Or they're like, it's a death penalty case. Like, they got nothing to lose in a DP case other than to go to trial. Like, you might as well, because it's like they're trying to kill you anyway. So you might as well just take a shot at it.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than that. I mean, what else could be worse?
Exactly. So, so in those types of cases, my job is not to try, like, you're not going to get a guy that they have the evidence on off. It doesn't happen. Like, when they have powerful evidence, they're going down. Like, that's just that. So what my job is to make sure that they got a fair trial, make sure that the prosecutors are on the up and up, that they gave us all the evidence, that they're trying the case properly, making sure that the cops did their job right, didn't violate any laws, and then making sure that my client understands their rights. And then if I've done that, I can go to bed, and they get a conviction. I go to bed. I can wake up. I can look at myself in the mirror, and I'm like, you know what? I did my job. Like, I feel great about it. It's like I did what I had to do as a defense attorney, because it's like this, like, that's TV shit that you're seeing, like defense attorneys, like, in there, it's like, if you kind of like, if you have a circumstantial case where it's questionable, that's where you kind of like this Allen case is like I want you guys in the chat to think about, like, all the cases that you've watched in the last 10 years, if you're court observers, and how many times can you remember, aside from, like, and put Karen Allen aside, But think of how many cases that you've watched that aren't self-defense cases, because self-defense cases are different, right? Those are interesting. It's like those are always
I did it, but it was self-defense.
Exactly. So, and that's such a different evaluation, because you're trying to figure out, was that person's actions reasonable under the circumstances? So that's always a different thing. Like, you'll always get people on both sides of those. But like in a case like this, your kind of run-of-the-mill murder case where they put on a trial, like, how many times have you seen where you've had like this massive of a split kind of like with the public in terms of innocence or guilt? And when I say innocence, that's the wrong word. It's
proof
either
of guilty,
guilty, right? It's either guilty or not guilty. Like, and that's the world that I live in. Did they meet their burden, or didn't they meet their burden? And here, it's like, I can't say that they didn't meet their burden, because the jury found the confessions to be compelling. They got to see the conditions of the confinement. You know what I'm saying? They saw him eating his own shit. They saw him spreading it. They all, like, I saw like this juror who was front row closest. He was at the end spot, older gentleman. When they were showing those in-cell things, he has his hands on top of his head. He couldn't even watch it.
Jeez.
So that it had an impact on them, right? Yet they still came back with their verdict. So,
because they might be thinking some of them might have been thinking, instead of them putting themselves in his position, they might be saying, hey, we are looking at a crazy man here that could have done this.
100%, man. So it's like, you never know, because that's the one absolute in the laws. You never know what a jury's going to do, or you never know what they're thinking. You just can't.
So I'm going to pick one from, instead of going through all of these questions, I'll pick one from each of these folks that sent me a list.
Okay.
This is from MR from the Discord. How do you explain the lack of an alibi?
I don't know. Like,
was that damaging? Like, we really don't know his whereabouts.
We don't. And like, but we do, right? Like, he says he's at the bridge. So the question becomes,
what about before that though? Like, what?
Right. Well, but like, here's the problem with it, is that you've got him giving two different time frames. Like, and like, one of my criticisms, and frankly, it's not really even a criticism. I don't know how the defense would have handled it, short of putting Alan on the stand.
Just a mistake by him. Just a mistake he made if he is guilty.
Right. It's like, how do you, he's got two different time frames at that point. Like, he's had the interview with Mullins and Liggett on the 13th. He knows that they like him. And I think, or like by the time, or I think it's in that particular interview when he gives the 12 to 1:30 time frame. So, but I think at that point he had already said, I'm not going to be anybody's fall guy, like two or three times prior to when they start digging into like the facts. So maybe at like that point, like, he's like, fuck, man, like they're looking at me at this shit, and that's 5 years in. Everybody kind of knows if you're following the case at all. And I like, that was the thing. Like, they didn't appear to be following the case all that thoroughly, like in terms of the Allens. Like, you saw some Google searches that, and it wasn't every day, it was every once in a while they'd look up the investigation to see like if they'd gotten anywhere, but it wasn't obsessively checking like, oh my God, are they getting closer? Are they getting, you know what I mean? So I don't know. How far do you think Kathy Allen is? Like, she does not think that her husband is.
She said it's not over, right? Isn't that something?
Oh yeah,
direct quote?
She is adamant. Like, I don't know. RA is BG. I don't know if you heard her earlier, but I asked her flat out, like, after the trial, I'm like, is there any part of you, because she sat through every day of the trial, like, aside from the one day when they were showing the videos, and that was just them showing the videos. She sat outside. But for every other day she was there, she heard all the evidence. She talked to Rick. And there's like that thing where people are like, oh, well, she was hanging up the phone. She really wasn't. Most of the calls were ending.
No, that was one of the questions that I skipped. Why do you think that his wife and mother were like trying to keep him from confessing?
Well, I think that at some point, you're talking to the lawyers. So she would call the lawyer. She's like, Rick's telling me he did it now. And like, the first thing that I tell every client that I've ever had retain us is if they're in custody or if they haven't been arrested, shut the fuck up. They're recording every goddamn thing on the phone. Like, don't be an idiot. You can't talk about your case over the phone because they're listening. They are listening to every word you're saying. So typically they know. And I'm assuming that Brad and Andy told Rick that shit. And like, remember, they didn't know exactly what was going on. They didn't get the videos of what was going on in that prison until way later. So after the June 15th thing, where Gull's calling them liars and saying they were exaggerating, which they weren't. Like, that was like the thing where I was kind of watching Gull. I'm like, all right, so Rosie wasn't lying in his June 15th thing. He was in a world of fucking hurt there, you know, and like he was being treated like I don't remember any pretrial detainee ever being treated anywhere in this country. Like I was Googling and I'm like, is there any other case where, you know, and it's not even that he's just a pretrial guy being held in a prison as opposed to jail. And I'm like, I should never assume that, you know, most pretrial detainees, which is somebody that's awaiting trial, are kept in the county jail. All right. So they knew that they couldn't keep them in Cass or in Kendall in Carroll because it's too small, but Cass was willing to take him in June. In June, it was already like the confessions were all out, you know? So I was frankly surprised in retrospect that, you know, that McClellan was fighting him on moving him at that point. I mean, at that point they knew, because that's when we first heard about the confessions, like in open court. Like I was sitting there in the courtroom and like McClellan mentions confessions. I'm like, what? I'm like, what? I'm like, tell me more. What do we got going on? You know? And it's like, and then you never hear about him for the rest of the day. I'm like, God damn it. I'm like, Gull, shut it down. It's like everybody was like looking at each other and we're all like, oh my God, are we going to hear some of these things? You know? So then obviously we had to wait a year and a half to start hearing them. And then, so I don't know if that answered your question, but
this one's from Do. His initials are Do. They didn't give me permission. I didn't ask to put their name out there. These ones are from emails.
Okay.
Title questions for Bob. This one's going to be a shotgun right here. It's going to be, it looks like he's kind of going off. It's going to be a whole bunch of questions that are kind of involving the same thing.
Okay.
Let's see. Do people in solitary confinement get an iPad, like tablet with internet, movies, music, video games, etc.? Do they get a free replacement tablet when they break it during a fit of rage? Do people in solitary get to make 700 phone calls to their wife and mother and whoever else? Do people in solitary get to order friggin' Taco Bell and chocolate at will? Do they get recreation time at the gym? Do they get suicide watch buddies, fellow inmates talking to them just outside the door? Do they have guards talking to them just outside the door? Do they see a psychologist so they can talk things out and confess during a therapy session every day?
It depends. So like the concept of solitary that you're talking about is punitive. And that was the argument, meaning that it's punishment. It's usually for bad behavior somewhere in the prison. Like you did something awful. Maybe you got in a fight with another inmate or worse, you killed them. So they're going to put you in solitary. What you don't see typically is a pretrial detainee. So like that's the part you're kind of confusing, VO, is that in this situation, you're talking about a guy who's presumed innocent. You can like that or not, but that's facts. So you typically never see somebody not be able to communicate with their loved one in terms of being able to see them, like the person that he needed most in his life, for 7 months. So if you think that and yes, most everybody that is sitting, whether they're a safekeeping or solitary, they're going to have a way to communicate. That's the way they do it these days. Tablets are way easier than having inmates line up for phones. Like that's just modern technology. So the answer to that is yes. When you've got them trying to keep him in there on safekeeping, and then remember they balanced the safekeeping where there was never any actual threat that was put forth to any judge that entered that order, meaning safekeeping, like they went in without Rick Allen having an attorney at that point, without Rick Allen being present at that point, and just went in front of Judge Diener or Gull, I can't remember which, and said, hey, we don't have any real threats, but common sense dictates that somebody's going to want to kill this guy. We want to put him in safekeeping.
That was Diener for sure. I have the document.
Yeah. So you know, like we have this thing called due process, VO, and you want that to be a thing in this country, dude. Like you don't want shit not to go through the process. Like if God forbid somebody in your family ever gets arrested, dude, I promise you, you're going to want due process of the law. You're going to want to know what's going on in your brother or your father or your best friend's case, whoever it may be. We can't just skip the rules, dude.
But you're not saying that there was lack of due process here, though. So let's make that clear, right?
Well, like in that part, there was
okay.
like Alan wasn't there. He didn't have a lawyer yet. They went in and got a safekeeping order without that being the case.
The argument I hear is that he at one point said he was going to get his own right around that time. And then he kind of switched over and said, well, I throw myself at the mercy of the court.
Well, no. So how it really went down is Kathy Allen so the day that he's arrested, and I know this factually, that he's like, you got to get me a lawyer. So she went out, tried to find a lawyer. And at that point, she finds some dude, pays $5,000 retainer to this guy. That was like all the money they had in the world that she could come up with at that minute in time. He's like, all right. And once she gets him paid, which is very typical for like Allie and I too. Like if somebody, like we get a call, they're like, oh, they just picked up my husband or my son or whoever it is.
Is that a retainer?
Like, yeah. So we'll say, all right, well, like pay us X amount. We'll make the call over to the cop shop. If we need to go over there, if they're trying to interrogate them, we'll go over and we'll try to get that stopped. And, you know, and we want X amount of dollars. So in this case, money is spent on a retainer. The guy's like, oh, well, you know, I'm going to call the sheriff and I'm going to try to find out what's going on. So on the 26th, they find out, on the 27th, when she gets him retained, the dude's like, I called and they said initially that he's not been formally charged and arrested yet. So by the 28th, and he's like, I'll see what I could do to get him out. And so on the 28th, dude calls back. He's like, look, here's the deal. He's like, they've now formally charged him. They charged him with all 4 of these murders. There's nothing else I can do. It'll be $300,000 in order to retain me to handle this case. Kathy's like, okay, well, don't have that, you know? So that's when you see like, so obviously there's a communication between her and Rick. She's like, this dude, like, we're not going to have money to hire a lawyer. Rick Allen has no idea how much it costs to hire a lawyer for a double homicide. No one does. You know, it's like
apparently it's over $1 million.
Well, like it's a lot. In this case, it's like, yeah, and that's for the hours put in. You know, it's like if you're an attorney, like that dude for the $300,000 would have been taking a beating in terms of if he would have done the work and how in terms of how much work he put in, it would have been like overwhelming. So you know, in that situation, then you're going to like, that's where Alan didn't understand that he had the right to counsel if he's indigent. He was the real breadwinner. I mean, Kathy had like a little job, but it wasn't going to be anything that was, you know, so once he's deemed indigent, Rick didn't know that he had to, you know, be on bended knee asking the court for a lawyer. They're going to appoint one anyway, as soon as they deem him indigent. So it's like people kind of popping off at Rick Allen for writing that letter. Like, how the fuck's that's by? Like, how do you know? Like, if you've never been in the system, dude, people do not know how it operates. Like they just don't, you know? So, and it's like one of those things where, you know, he's writing the letter. He's like, oh shit, I fucked up. Cause they did try to get a lawyer and she actually retained a guy. He just didn't do shit after, and he never refunded the money after making 2 phone calls. So shame on him.
Well, I wish I could ask you all these questions.
I'll come back again, dude. You know that. Like,
yeah, we'll have to do a part 2 on this.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me ask you one of my questions here, and then we'll end it here. Did you have fun?
At the trial?
No, here today.
Oh yeah, I did.
On the Sleuth Intuition channel.
I did have fun. I always enjoy you, man. It's like I'm a kind of see what you get type of dude. I'm a pretty genuine guy, man. You know, I don't run from shit. You know, it's like I love the discussion, man. I think that's why we do this, right?
Yeah, like, I think it's necessary. I think it's necessary.
And I think that like and people deserve to have their opinions heard. And if they have questions and if I can answer them, more than happy to do it, man. You know what I mean? It's like I've got nothing to hide. Nothing. You know, I'm proud of what I do. I'm proud of what I've done for my career. And, you know, I've got a knowledge base and I respect people that disagree with me. You're allowed to disagree with me. You know what I'm saying? It's like, just keep it respectful. We can agree to disagree all day. Like I said, I argued against people that disagreed with me every day of my life. And we always kept it respectful and professional. You know, that's just kind of the nature of the business of being a lawyer. So, you know, like I really just, my takeaway for people is I just try to kind of educate them on the reality of what's going on out in the criminal justice world. And it ain't perfect, you know, and like, this isn't a game. Like you know, these aren't teams we're rooting for. There's not team Rick or team Abby and Libby. It's like, we all want justice
Precedent.
for girls, you know. It's like, I really do. I want nothing more. Dude, like I would love to be sitting here today as confident as you are and as confident as some of your chat is that they got the right fucking guy. I want to feel that way, dude. I really do. Like if they would have just done the process normally, like I said, if they would have like just put him somewhere normal and held him for a year and a half and he would have started puking shit up, I'm feeling pretty good right now. You know, that they got the dude. Like he just, cause like, you know, there's just so much weird with the case, dude. I'd never seen anything like it, man. Honestly, I really haven't, like from a procedural side of it. And obviously,
and hopefully we can learn from it.
I hope so. I hope so. And look, I mean, this is going to be like, there's going to be like your lives in a year when the appellate briefs are getting written, that you'll get a lot of content out of, because you're not going to be able to read a brief in one live. They're lengthy, you know what I mean? And you're going to want to read it because it's going to be interesting, you know. And it's like the trial is just the beginning of the process, and now once you have a conviction, it's a lengthy process, which I hope that somebody is letting the families of the girls know what the fuck is going on as that process goes on, because I see it all the time. Like neither side, whether it's Kathy's got the ability to have me kind of explain what's going on, but I hope that the Patty's and Abby's people are going to be left, you know, be told what's happening during the process, because that's scary. Like all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, they filed an appeal. And just hearing those words is terrifying to people that are like finally got relief. You know, they're like, what the fuck does this mean? And prosecutors are notoriously bad about saying, hey, this is what this means. Let's go over it. I want you to feel comfortable. You know what I'm saying? So hopefully they have somebody in their lives that is going to explain to them what exactly is going on with it and how the process works. And just know this thing is going to rear its ugly head for them on several occasions in the next few years.
I was going to ask you that, you know, before we end the stream, can you tell us a little bit what to expect from the sentencing on December 20th?
She's going to give him the max. So whatever the max is, she's not going to be able to sentence him on all 4 counts.
Is this a new jury for that?
No. This is going to be all Gull. Jury,
Gull, okay.
Like in Indiana, jury doesn't have anything to do with like laying down the sentence. Okay. They've done their job. This will be Gull. Well, you'll get in there. There may be some mitigation done by the defense. It probably won't be a ton. You'll have some aggravation from Nick McClelland. And then, you know, Gull's going to know, like she's going in there knowing what she's saying. He'll get the max, you know, so he'll be
like maybe 200 years or something like that.
I think a $130 is what I'm hearing is, yeah. So, cause she can't charge him. She can't sentence him on all 4 because they're duplicative. So she'll charge him on the two murders, a straight up murder.
So it's individually.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Yep.
All right. Maybe we'll have you back on after that.
All right, brother.
All right, man. I appreciate it. What do you got going on your channel? Your link to your channel is in the description. So I recommend everybody go check them out, give them a chance, and go support that channel.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sleuth. I took a break from Delphi last night. Did a little, like I said, I went into that Suzanne Simpson case, which is really sad. It's another woman apparently murdered by her husband, 4 kids, you know, like senseless. You know, and I'm always like, probably the next case I'm going to be digging into. I'm kind of fascinated by this Corey Richens thing out in Utah. You know, the woman who poisoned her husband with the walk the dog letter, and then went and wrote a children's book for her kids about how to mourn about their father that she poisoned. So like that one's kind of
twisted shit.
Some twisted shit, dude. So because it's like people, like there's plenty of people that I believe are guilty. So I'm usually on the side that they got the right guy. So just to kind of like lay that out there, because a lot of people are like, Motta thinks everybody's innocent. I'm like, nah, I'm pretty confident they got the right guy in Koberger. And I'm pretty confident. I'm super confident they got the right guy in Huerman. Super confident that
we've been
the
covering
right
the Huerman case for quite a while, so we're going to stay on top of both of those cases. So
yeah, you should.
Maybe we'll invite you on and talk about those cases later on.
Yeah,
as well.
for sure. Have you ever, you know who a great resource is? I don't know if you've ever talked to Catch Lisk. Raul is a great resource. Like he's got the map. Like he's been knee deep in Lisk. Like just does a ton of amazing work on that case and super victim centric guy. He's like a all heart type of dude and like just spends huge amounts of time. Look him up. Like if you're doing some,
what's the first name? I didn't catch the first name.
Raul, but his kind of like his handle is Catch Lisk. Like he's easiest to find. Yeah, Catch Lisk.
Capitals.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's like his handle. I don't like he's got a YouTube, but he's not super active on there. He's really active on Twitter. I don't know if you're on Twitter or not.
I'm on Twitter, but not a whole lot. It's more and more.
We'll find him easy. Or if you want, just hit me up. I can connect you all.
Sure. I'll shoot you an email.
He's put this map together of like victims all over the country. That's unbelievable, man. He does incredible work, real true victims advocate. So I think you'd dig him. So, all right, brother, have yourself a magical weekend. And I'm going to go watch the Bears get their face kicked in by Green Bay on Sunday. What a nightmare.
Well, don't do anything I wouldn't do.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. And hopefully in the chat, you guys, got some, I guess, entertainment value and or educational value out of it.
At the least. I
hope so. All right, brother. Be good. Thanks for the invite.
Take care. Bye.
All right, you too. Bye.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for today. I appreciate all you guys being respectful in the chat. I know emotions are high, but we can't just be at each other's throats all the time. We have to get out of our echo chamber. And if we disagree with folks, we can't shy away from that. We got to bring them in here and we got to put them in the hot seat. And we're willing to do the same. But I do want to give a shout out to everybody who sponsored today's live stream. That includes Solar Chef Steph, Jessica Gilman, Delulu. Thank you so much. Again, Jessica, thank you. I appreciate your guys' generosity. RA is BG, Cindy Lean, thank you so much. The Crime Sleepers, shout out to the Crime Sleepers. Thank you. RA is BG again. And Delulu again. Thank you guys. And everybody who continues to donate to the Cash App and the Venmo. I couldn't do this without you. And the biggest shout out to my members and all of you hardworking mods who keep the chat chill. So thank you. And if you're part of the replay crew, you know exactly what to do. Leave us a comment and we'll get back to you. And I'm sure if you need to reach Bob, go click the link in the description and that'll bring you right to his channel. So until next time, peace.